Hello, everyone. Nice to see you on my channel, Touching Stories. Today you will hear an amazing story that is based on real events. It's a drama that will be a very important lesson for everyone.
I see you have no pride at all. Her husband cooks on the side of the kids and she's making excuses for him. Kitten, you're not gonna swear. Lucy kisses her husband on the cheek, feigning excitement on her face. I don't know, I'll have to think about it. Depends on the gravity of the act, he jokes. I invited the Walkers over for New Year's Eve. Archie turned to his wife. Well, honey, I know you can't stand Selena, but she offered to celebrate with me today, and I got confused and couldn't say no. I stupidly told her to come over, and then I thought about the fact that you might not like it. Please don't swear. You have to be friends with your neighbors. Anything can happen in life. Wrapping her arms around her husband's waist, Lucy looked ingratiatingly into his eyes. Oh, please. Selena was so happy. I felt so sorry for her. She'd been complaining to me all night last night that she and Harry weren't on the best of terms. They're going through a divorce. I think Harry's on a bender. He comes home late from work, doesn't help her, barely talks to her. He's not happy all the time. She's the kind of woman I'd run away from. Talks like Harry, but she's no better. I saw her kissing some dude in a car. She saw me, she jumped out like she'd been illegally caught in the act. Interesting lady. Maybe you're imagining things. You never know who might have gotten a ride. I didn't give up hope. Yeah, we know the type. It's written all over her face that she's a promiscuous woman. What I can't figure out is, what could you possibly have to do with her? Couldn't you make friends with someone decent? But I guess I can't change your mind. So are you gonna say yes or no? And we'll have more fun. I'm trying to avoid the unpleasant subject. I don't know why my husband's so prejudiced against Selena. She's a normal woman, not a quarrelsome one like some of the others. She's helped us out so many times. She took our son to her place, and she let us go out for fun. We didn't abuse her, of course. Selena's got a kid herself, but still. Well, as long as she promised. What can I do? Let them come, he said grudgingly, and Lucy threw herself around his neck. Archie, I never told you were the best husband in the world. Yes, you did. Suck up. My husband and I have a wonderful relationship. I know he loves me. I trust him. I'm sure he's not interested in other women. In fact, neither am I interested in other men. We're both civil servants. There are plenty of women around him. I'm sure a lot of them are making eyes at him. I bet they do. My husband is handsome, smart, tactful, knows how to present himself. He makes a decent salary. I'm also not lacking in male attention. What can I say? There are daredevils trying to woo me, but any patience comes to an end, because they quickly realize it's completely useless. Lucy, you're a great hostess, Harry praised as he tasted the soup, glancing at Selena, who wasn't eating much, but was still holding her champagne glass. Let's have a good old year. And you, Harry, snack and talk less. Snorted, unhappily shrugging her shoulders, fixing her flawless hairstyle. That's it, everyone. You're going to fight at home. The eyebrow muscle visibly contracted, giving his face an expression of dissatisfaction. But what can you do? You can't pick your neighbors. I look at him, trying to beg his forgiveness. Let's dance. Selena mutes the TV, turns up the slow music on her phone, and asks Archie to dance. And you, Harry, don't be shy. Ask Lucy to dance. She threw her husband. I take a sip of champagne, grab the dirty plates off the table, and start shoving them into the dishwasher. I don't feel like dancing. My husband doesn't feel like dancing neither. The kids are at the table with us, but Selena's clinging to Archie like a tick. She's pulling on his arm, giving him the rejection stare, smiling. She's having a good time. Selena, what, dancing? He tries to make a joke, but the neighbor, instead of answering, touchingly snuggles up, wrapping her arms around his shoulders. Selena, cheered up, trying to hide a drop of jealousy behind her sinew, squeezed out of herself. She's been complaining to me that you don't pay enough attention to her. I'm telling you, but I'm watching. The more her husband tries to pull away, the more she clings to him. Don't listen to her. She'll tell you all kinds of things. She sends me to the second shift. She's always complaining that I don't bring in enough money. I'd often have to take a part-time job, and then she complains that I don't help her around the house. Yeah, I thought you were the one running away from home. Selena suspects you're seeing another woman. I was hesitant at first, but then I decided to ask. Even if she did, I can assure you Selena won't be too upset. We're headed for a divorce. Lucy, is everything okay? Breaking out of Selena's clingy hands, her husband asks, squinting at her with unhappy eyes. I feel her boiling, but she tries not to show it. It's about 11 o'clock. While I was putting the kids to bed, Archie cheered up. As I turned off the bedroom light, I heard Selena's voice. Let's have a drink. It's New Year's Eve, and we haven't really spent the old one yet. Archie grabs the champagne. Everyone's laughing. The president begins to speak. Selena yells for everyone to make a wish as the chimes strike. At 2:00 a.m., Harry heads home. He yawned, wished everyone another happy new year, and went home to bed. Selena didn't even bat an eyebrow. Let's have another drink. You're so boring. How you celebrate New Year's Eve is how you spend it. Shouts, having already safely forgotten that the children are sleeping in the next room. I'm already wishing she'd calm down and go home. The party turns into a real booze party. Selena is happily joined by my favorite husband. Archie, maybe that's enough. I know you. You'll be sick tomorrow. I'm trying to get through, although I realize it's useless in this case. Husband is now on his own wave and will not listen to anyone. Darling, I'm not in the slightest. I'm completely sober. Selena, poor. He's bringing his empty shot glass closer to her. Actually, my husband doesn't drink much. Maybe I'm just picking on him. After all, New Year's Eve only comes once a year. By 5 o'clock, they're calming down. Archie can't keep up very well. Selena doesn't care. If I hadn't seen how much she'd knocked back, I'd have thought she hadn't had a drink at all. She's holding up well, speaking quite clearly. Archie, will you help me carry Anna home? She says to her husband, smiling at my reaction. No problem. He shakes his head, though he can barely stand on his own 2 feet. Selena, don't touch Anna. Let the baby sleep with us. I don't want to wake her up. I'm trying to be indignant. I'm afraid for the baby. God forbid Archie drops her, but Selena won't listen to what I say. She's standing her ground. No. No. Anna's gonna spend the night at home. Lucy, don't worry, I'll help him. Archie takes a sleepy Anna in his arms. Selena supports him so he doesn't fall and closes the door in my face. I start to freak out, but I try to calm down and put it down to an extra glass of champagne. After putting the salads in the fridge and loading the plates into the dishwasher, I go into the shower. I wash off the cosmetics from my face and a little refreshed. Finally, I go to bed. I close my eyes. And only now I realize that my husband is still not here. I get up, throw on a terry robe, and go to the neighbors. Anna was carefully placed on their bed. The child didn't even wake up, just turned on her side, curled up and sweetly sniffled. Let's go. Selena grabbed Archie's hand and dragged him into the kitchen. Harry was snoring on the couch. As she passed him, Selena put her index finger to her lips. Archie didn't need to explain anything and they tiptoed past. Closed the kitchen door tight in the kitchen. Opened the refrigerator, pulled out a full bottle of vodka. 2 shot glasses from the wall cupboard. I didn't think you were so hot. Watching her precise actions, Archie whispered, barely moving his tongue. As it is, I'm unlucky with my husband. He doesn't love me. And I want to be loved, idolized. I want a man willing to go to great lengths for me. Is that too much to ask? Filled the glasses to the brim, set the bottle aside. Archie was about to put out his hand, but Selena came to him. She sat on her knees and without taking her eyes off his face, began to wiggle her ass. This unexpected turn of events took Archie's breath away, and when she unzipped his pants, he stopped breathing. I've been pining for you for a long time. Lucy's stupid. She doesn't appreciate you. I wouldn't let a husband like that go anywhere with another woman. Then she doesn't care. She doesn't love you. But I do, and for a long time. Whispering, she touched his lips affectionately, stroked his cheek with the palm of her hand, started unbuttoning his shirt. Selena, what are you doing? Harry's asleep behind the wall. What if he hears? You can't wake him up with a gun right now. He's lazy. Even if he hears something, he's too lazy to get up. He'll roll over on his other side and keep snoring. Takes off his blouse without unbuttoning the top. Who the hell is Lucy? Who's gonna think of her now? The liquor had made his brain go to the back of his head, or maybe even out of his head. Selena, as if sensing his mood, began to moan softly, doing everything for him. It felt so good, so pleasant, and Archie, as if coming to his senses, began to help her, clinging hands around her thighs. At that moment, It was like she was so cool and fucking awesome. Not a woman, but a nuclear explosion. I remembered only when Selena jumped down, ran away, and returned in a short robe. Carefully zipped up his pants, smiled, gave him a quick peck on the lips. And I began to come to my senses, realizing that by giving in to a momentary impulse, I had done something that I would never have allowed myself to do when I was sober. There was a quiet knock at the door. When I heard my wife's voice, I grabbed a shot glass from the table and poured it into myself, trying to drown out the stupor, to keep from falling apart, and to do everything I could to keep Lucy from guessing. Archie, maybe that's enough. Let's go home. Lucy stares at Selena's satisfied face. She smiles defiantly, tucking her rope around her chest. Of course. Let's go home. She gets up and without paying attention to her neighbor passes by. Tomorrow we'll continue our conversation. I enjoyed talking to you. I could not even guess that you are such an interesting conversationalist, says, drilling his back with his eyes, hoping that having felt her gaze on him, will turn around and at least wink imperceptibly. But her thoughts did not bother him at all. A little sobered up, he thought about forgetting as quickly as possible, or better to erase from his memory everything that just a few minutes ago happened here. Being next to his wife, I felt like a particular asshole and nothing. He could not call himself otherwise, because to have sex with a woman who he did not respect and even despise could only such a complete moron like him. The saying that there are no unattractive women, only a little vodka, and a pillowcase over the hand does wonders. Such sayings made my soul feel even worse and sadder. I hugged my wife and buried my nose in her hair. It would have been better to go to my parents to celebrate the holiday. There I would not get so drunk and would not come to such a life. In the morning I woke up to a persistent ringing at the door. Who could come this early? I look at the clock. It's 5 minutes to 11. I turn my head in the hope that my husband will wake up and open the door, but he sleeps and does not even move. You bet. So much to drink and mix it all up. I get up. I see the child is sitting on the carpet, and in order not to wake up his parents, took a gift from Santa Claus under the tree and looks at it with pleasure. Mom, look, he brags about the huge faucet. How independent you are. Now I'll open the door and we'll go to eat. Have you been up long? No, just now. He nods his head. I open the door. I see a happy Selena and her daughter. Oh, she's restless. The man can't sleep. Hair and makeup in the morning. It's like she's never been to bed. Are you still asleep? Without asking permission, she crosses the threshold, closes the door behind her. He sends Anna straight to Tony's. Archie is still asleep, and I'm not, as you can see. I answered yawning, feeling like a gray mouse against her background. It's like I never slept. I jumped up at the crack of dawn. I made Anka's porridge, fed Harry and came straight to you. I was so pleased with what we had last night. I haven't had that much fun in a long time. I rolled my eyes. I want to do it again. While you're setting the table, why don't I wake Archie up? No more sleeping. The party's on. I'm stomping on it. Wow, I don't recognize you. I'm sensing Harry had something to do with it. Archie, you've got the distinctive streaks of a woman's fingernails on your back. I could just picture her and Selena having a good time, and she hadn't been with them more than 20 minutes. Is there anything you want to tell me? Her tone made it clear that nothing good was in store for him anytime soon. Ignoring the headache, Archie jumped up and rushed to the mirror. He spun around, looking at his back from every angle, as if he didn't know where the damn scratches had come from. He glanced at her, but Lucy was unfazed. Barely holding back tears, she waited for him to stop jumping and try to convince her otherwise. Lucy, I don't know, I mumbled. He wasn't going to confess to his wife even at gunpoint. If he confesses, he's kaput. Lucy wouldn't tolerate cheating. It's like putting a red-hot iron rod to your chest and immediately asking for an apology. No, Selena can say what she wants, but he's not stupid. He'll never confess. He'll keep his defenses up until he wins. You never know. Maybe Selena tried to do it during another dance. Then I'm calling Selena. I grabbed his cell phone off the bedside table, turned it on, dialed the password. Your Selena will tell you. You can't respect yourself if you trust her. Did you notice how she was all over me last night? She didn't even care about Harry. Rubbed his temples, wrinkled his nose again. My tooth was starting to ache. Lucy, let's forget about last night. You won't invite your half-witted neighbor over again, and I'll try not to upset you ever again. You talk so much, but you never answered my question. Did you have intimacy with Selena last night? Before Archie could open his mouth, Lucy put her hand up. Let's keep it short. Yes or no? She looked at him again like she was handing him money. I don't remember very well. You saw the state I was in. Selena told me this morning that you were, but I think she's lying. Lucy sighed heavily. Even if Archie said no now, she still wouldn't believe it. So he was. Well, thank you, dear, for such a great New Year's present. Opened the closet. Took out a dress, clothes for my son. Tony, son, get dressed. We're going with you to Aunt Dina's. Is Daddy coming with us? He asked me incredulously. Daddy's not feeling well. He's staying home. I rushed to the bathroom, washed my face with cold water. I sighed. Her face had become an impenetrable mask. There was no point in staying in such a tense situation. She tried to get into his position, but intrusive thoughts came into her head and were nailed firmly in place. Mom, I don't want to go to Aunt Dina's. Can I stay home with Daddy? I came closer to my father. As a sign of male solidarity, he clung to him, as if he understood everything and was afraid of losing him. Lucy, stop it. You don't have to run away from your problems. Let's solve them together. He tried to grab my dress out of my hands. Stay. I beg you. I'm sorry. It's all that fucking alcohol. I shouldn't have gotten drunk last night. I give you my word it won't happen again. I don't want to lose you. He said something else, but Lucy didn't listen. She gathered some papers just in case. Cosmetics. Put a couple new toys in the bag for her son. Tony wouldn't budge. He was standing next to his father, and he wasn't going anywhere. Don't you want to come with me? Tony nodded affirmatively. Archie stroked his head affectionately. That's fine. Stay with Dad. You've got a fridge full of food. You won't go hungry. I just need to clear my head. I gave Archie a hateful look, nodded her head and shrugged, reminding him that he was just getting started. You had to be responsible for your actions. Archie's eyes showed genuine remorse, but that didn't make it any easier. Lucy, please stay home. If you don't want to see anyone, let me and my son go to my parents. You'll calm down, and tomorrow we'll talk calmly. He lifted Tony in his arms. His son tightly wrapped his arms around his neck, as if trying to protect him from everyone. A tear rolled down his cheek. Lucy wiped it away discreetly, her throat constricted. She had no idea how to go on living. Tears came to her eyes again. She didn't want to show her weakness, but she couldn't help it. She left the apartment before she changed her mind. I prayed to God I didn't see anyone in the entryway. I cursed when I saw Harry outside the elevator. Lucy, what happened? Why are you in tears? The last thing I wanted to do right now was talk, especially not with Vasily. The only desire was to rush past and go downstairs without waiting for the elevator. Don't pay attention. I tried to say it calmly, but tears started to flow down my cheeks like a teen. I was ashamed of my weakness, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't be strong at the moment. I don't get it. Did I miss something last night? Selena came home from your place all worked up. She had a fight with me. I decided to get out of the house so I wouldn't freak out. God forbid, you run out of the house crying. Lucy? They got into the elevator. Harry pressed the number 1. Lucy looked away, not knowing what to do. If she told him now, he'd rush to Archie to confront him. They'd have a fight. And Tony's home. Will you give me a lift? He asked her. Where to? She sniffed. But who cares where? She wasn't in any hurry anyway. Anywhere. I'll walk around a bit. Calm down. Then maybe visit a friend. I don't really feel like going anywhere. I shivered from the cold, pulled up my collar. I buttoned the top button of my jacket. When he saw her approving gesture, he sat down next to her in the passenger seat. I have a better suggestion. Let's go visit my cousin. Started the engine. Looked out my windows. Archie and Tony were standing by the window. My first inclination was to make a rather obscene gesture and show fact, but I held back. I didn't want to set a bad example for my son. Lucy, is this comfortable? I heard Harry's voice. I turned to him and patted him on the shoulder. It's very comfortable. Let's go. You won't regret it. We have a lot to talk about. You still haven't told me why you were crying. They drove in complete silence for several minutes. Lucy was grateful to Harry for not asking questions, but her joy didn't last long. Harry, as if awake, asked the question that had apparently been bugging him. I had a fight with my husband, she answered succinctly. Did Archie hurt you? He turned his head and looked at her for a long time, waiting patiently for an answer. Lucy hesitated for a few minutes, but she didn't notice that she was talking. She overheard the conversation. I had to pin her husband against the wall. Turns out your wife and my husband managed to get some privacy and sleep together last night. I paused, waiting for a reaction, but Harry shook his head in surprise and dismissal. Why am I not surprised? He said it like he was pretty sure of how this was going to end. Don't you care? Harry, did you understand me correctly? Your wife and my husband slept together. The worst part is, it happened on New Year's Eve. Now I'm going from my favorite holiday to my hated holiday. How can you do that? I was silent only when Harry took out his cell phone and, without even looking at who was calling, dropped the call, slipped it back into his pocket, turned away to the window. I expected something like this. Selena's got nothing to lose. We're long gone. We live as neighbors for our daughter. Is that so? Lucy raised her eyebrows in surprise, and a guilty expression appeared on Harry's face. You're the only one I feel sorry for in this situation. I think Selena only befriended you to get Archie off her back. The car felt warm. Harry took off his hat, ruffled his hair with his hand, stared out the windshield for a long time, thinking about something. He took a deep breath. What are you going to do? Are you going to forgive me? I don't know. Probably not. I can't. Nasty. I don't know anything yet. How can you forgive something like that? She shook her head as if she really didn't want to know what would happen later. Near a lonely high-rise building, she turned off the car and sighed with relief, as if she had finally taken off a responsible burden. Here we are. Let's go. I'll introduce you to my sister. I unbuckled my seatbelt. This is embarrassing. It's a holiday, and we're empty-handed. And the store's out of business. Harry looked at the closed blinds of the Minimart with undisguised regret. He looked around, sighing heavily. Don't worry. I've got Dina who's understanding. Let's go. The sudden ringing of the front doorbell made Archie flinch. He and Tony looked at each other, certain that Lucy was back, and raced to the door. Happy holidays again. Archie, I just got off the phone with Harry. Turns out he and your wife are spending the holiday at Dina's. They're having a good time, and we're no worse for it. I made soup for the kids and set the table for you and me. Take Tony and come over. Anne is bored out of her mind. Let them play with Tony at our place. Archie coughed, the look of confusion on her face at her insolence. Barely restraining himself from grabbing her by the scruff of the neck and pushing her out, he gritted his teeth. What do you want? Didn't I make it clear that I don't want you to set foot here anymore? No, U-V-I-D-N-T. I sent my son to his room. And yesterday you said I was hot. Or are you afraid your wife will find out? She's got a wicked grin. She's not interested in you right now. She's got my husband with her. Harry's gonna try to get her to trust him. He's always making an example of your Lucy. I know he's not much of a talker, but I think he likes her. She crossed her arms over her chest and leaned back against the door. On the lips continued to play a crooked grin, as if she was not going to react to his hurtful words. I told my wife everything in good faith. I hope I can beg her forgiveness. Roughly pushed her aside, opened the door. Go away, and I'm warning you, I don't want you in our house ever again. If I see a woman, I'll throw her down the stairs. I grabbed her elbow, started to push her out. I was so worried I'd done something so pig-headed. He felt lousy, and now he was so dumbfounded by her words that it seemed that if he hurt Lucy with a hurtful word, he would definitely throw her down the stairs. He'd have to prove he pushed her down. I didn't realize she was so stubborn. So you had a drunken hookup. You just sit there and shut up. Pretend it never happened. No, it didn't. She's been coming around a lot. If she's decided that she's got him, then let him sleep well. It all happened so fast that he didn't even realize it. And if I get pregnant? Smirked, as if the pregnancy is already safely in her pocket. Don't be a fool and have an abortion. Because making babies while drunk is a crime in my book. What makes you think the baby's gonna be unhealthy? She was talking sweetly, like she was flirting. Because we were both out of our minds. Only a stupid woman like you would take such a desperate risk, but that's not going to work on me. Archie tried to close the door, but Selena flirtatiously put out her slender leg. That's ridiculous. I had Anna conceived in exactly the same condition, and nothing. A perfectly healthy child. shrugged her shoulders in surprise. You can't go wrong once in a while, and my friends had a child born with abnormalities. Do you want that? And don't ever come to me again with a question like that. I'm gonna have a short conversation with you. I'll drag you to the hospital by the scruff of your neck. Selena snorted. She removed her foot. Archie slammed the door shut. He sighed with relief. Let that asshole go to hell, and he didn't want to be dictated to. When he heard Tony on the phone with someone, he rushed into the living room. It's okay, Mom. No, I'm not hungry. Daddy fed me. Daddy's busy right now. Aunt Selena came over and they're talking. Archie rolled his eyes. He grabbed the phone from Tony. Lucy, he said, I'm sorry, but no one would listen. Go to bed without me. I'm staying at Dina's tonight. Tomorrow, Tony will be picked up by his mom. I've made arrangements with her. And where will sleep over, Harry said hoarsely, but the question remained unanswered. There was a short beeping sound in the phone. His heart was pounding so loudly with excitement that he could barely hear what Tony was saying. And only when he saw a broken wheel from a new car in his hands, I realized that the child needed help. Son, don't worry, we'll fix your car for sure, but later. Right now, Daddy doesn't have time for that. Get ready. We're going to visit Aunt Dina. We're going to Mom's. Tony was running around, laughing contagiously, trying to make his father laugh, but he wasn't succeeding. Tony, stop fooling around. Get dressed quickly. I told him to get dressed. Archie wasn't having any fun today. Nothing was happy, and the holiday greetings coming on the phone pissed him off. It was a good thing he didn't have to make a happy face and pretend to be someone he didn't know. Are you dressed? Seeing that his father was in a bad mood, Tony tucked his t-shirt into his pants. He put on a sweatshirt, a hat, wrapped a scarf around his neck. He took his shoes from the shelf by himself. Daddy, are you coming soon? I'm ready to go. Archie looked at his son. Tony stood on the doorstep, shuffling from foot to foot. He's so big now. Serious, sensible. It'd be a shame if his wife didn't forgive him and filed for divorce. My heart was torn to shreds at the mere thought of God forbid I become a Sunday daddy. To be a Sunday daddy for his child. And about the fact that next to Lucy will eventually appear someone else, I did not want to think at all. All right, son, here we go. Yeah. Dinah took a second bottle of wine from the bar. Harry hardly drank at all. He took a few tastes, just to avoid offending the girls and dilute their female company. What are you going to do? Dinah sighed unceasingly, gritting her teeth and shaking her head, and when Lucy had tears in her eyes, she stroked her head like a little girl. I don't know. At the moment, I'm disgusted by him. If it weren't for the baby, I wouldn't have called at all. My nose was sniffling with resentment again. I don't think I can do this. As soon as I leave the house, Selena's back at his place. This is out of line. He's gonna tell me he wants to keep the family together. I couldn't hold back the tears. They were rolling down my cheeks and dripping down. Think about it, but I can assure you that people don't change. Look at me. A prime example. Dina poked herself in the chest with her index finger. Looking at Harry, she smiled embarrassedly, wrapped her palms around her flaming cheeks. She liked Harry, and the way he behaved at the table suggested that their acquaintance wouldn't end there. She would try, though. Dina couldn't help noticing that Harry was looking at Lucy with great interest. I forgave my husband once. He swore that the devil has gone astray. He loves me alone and he doesn't need anyone else. Dina sighed, waved her hand, grinned and continued. He sat on his ears. I naturally believed and forgave him. And what do you think he stopped there? The second time again forgave. What's the use? I got divorced anyway, and I don't regret it. It's better to be alone than to live with a man you don't trust. Dina looked at her upset sister again. I've been through it all myself. I wouldn't wish it on my enemy. When I divorced my husband, I lost 6 pounds on nervous grounds. She raised her index finger up and stroked Lucy's shoulder. Dina, where is your husband now? Harry asked. Who knows where he is? I'm not interested in his life. If he'd remarried, I can only sympathize with his wife. I don't want that kind of happiness. Someone rang the doorbell. Dinah got up reluctantly and went to open the door. The three of them were sitting so well together. I didn't want to disturb the idyll with idle chatter. Mommy, the first to enter the kitchen, was a happy Tony. Julie's heart began to beat twice as fast. Happy New Year, a familiar voice followed. She turned around slowly, snorted angrily, as if giving Archie a chance to come to his senses before it was too late and leave. She turned away again, trying to pretend she was too busy to concentrate and not be distracted by guests no one was expecting. Out of the corner of her eye, she noticed that her husband was leaning his shoulder against the door jamb, watching her, and despite the unfriendly reception, he wasn't going anywhere. "Harry, we need to talk to you. Let's go out and have a smoke in the entryway," he said in a tone as if he was apologizing in advance. "Harry, don't go. You don't want to get in a fight. The party's already ruined. All we have to do is smash each other's noses to be happy." As I took a couple steps to get between them, I heard Harry's words near my ear. "Lucy, don't worry. We're just going to talk. I promise you, no one's going to fight." Archie pressed his lips together, nodded to Harry, and ignoring his wife's displeasure, went out into the corridor. "Harry, I'm sorry. I acted like a total asshole last night. I don't know what came over me. If it makes you feel any better, you can punch me in the face. I deserve it." They went down to the landing between the floors. Leaning against the windowsill, Archie lowered his head. It was shameful and unbearably hard to look his neighbor in the eye. His own powerlessness made him want to scream, to gnash his teeth, to smash everything around him. "Don't worry. It's okay. Selena and I have been neighbors for a long time. We each have our own personal lives. I'm not worried about her. I'm more worried about Lucy. I'd love to punch you for crying." After taking a short break, I adjusted my watch. "Why are you here? Lucy needs to calm down. Let her come to her senses. She just stopped crying and here you show up." Shaking his hand, Archie forced himself to pull himself together to focus. He put a wry grin on his face. He opened his mouth to make it clear that he wasn't going to let the conversation continue like this. Leaned in so no outsider could hear him whisper, "I'll deal with my wife myself. We don't need counselors or outsiders. Why don't you just pack up and go home? How you got here is of absolutely no interest to me, but I'm warning you. I never want to see you around Lucy again. I hope we understand each other, and please comfort your wife. I may say some hurtful things, but I'm not interested in winning like Selena. I hear you." Harry looked reproachfully at Archie, shook his head, and sighed. He didn't feel like going home at all. He liked being in the company of girls so much, listening to them talk. He didn't try to stand out against their background or make an impression. He just listened and was a little envious. It was obvious that Lucy was very worried, crying. Despite the incomprehensible deed, she loved Archie and even tried to write it all off to alcohol intoxication. He wanted the same true love, not this ridiculous relationship in which Selena had dragged him many years ago and from which only painful and unpleasant memories remained. He shifted his thoughtful gaze to the window, stared at one point for a few seconds, pulled out his cell phone for something. "You expecting a call from your wife?" Archie grinned. He loosened the collar of his shirt, twitched his pectoral muscles, trying to shake off the obsession and pull himself together. "None of your business," Harry threw over his shoulder, climbing the flight of stairs and thinking up a serious excuse for the girls as he went. "Thank you for your hospitality. It was a pleasure to meet you." Eyes glanced at the surprised girls with genuine gratitude. A little longer lingered on Dina, who opened and closed her mouth like a fish, twisted her head and apparently did not want to let him go anywhere. "Why don't you stay? What's your hurry? You've said yourself that no one's waiting for you at home," she mumbled, glancing at Archie with undisguised anger, and no doubt in her mind that he wasn't the only one involved. She was even more upset when Harry pulled out his phone, asked for the address, and hailed a cab. "Tony, let's go outside. We'll see Uncle Harry off and get some air," Dinah grumbled unhappily. Tony got his mother's approval and rushed off to get dressed, and Dina looked at her son-in-law expectantly, sighed deliberately heavy, rose from her seat, and wagged her finger at Archie, leaving them alone. "You go home too. We'll talk to you, but later. I can and don't want to see you. I need to think to put everything on the shelf and soberly look at our situation." Biting her lower lip painfully, she lowered her gaze, trying to make her face as independent and calm as possible. "I don't want to hear anything now. I beg you not to touch me for at least 2 days. Give me time to think, otherwise I won't be able to stand it, and it will only make things worse for everyone. Lucy, please. This is not a case of breaking up a family. I don't give a shit about Selena." When he saw her tears, he ran his hand nervously through his hair, choosing his words more carefully. "That stupid hen found out you'd left with Harry and came back. But I was specific about the situation and explained that if she ever touched our doorbell again, she'd go tumbling down the stairs. You can rest assured I will. There was an oppressive silence in the kitchen. I love you. I said it quietly. I give you my word I'll never let myself get that drunk again. Tony and I will be leaving now, but I'm counting on you and your discretion. Please come home. My son and I will be waiting for you. The happy moments of their happy family life flashed before my eyes. My heart involuntarily clenched at the thought that such moments would remain in the distant past and never be repeated. A picture appeared in front of her eyes when Archie proposed to her. The wedding, the birth of their son, Tony's first steps. How on March 8 Archie and his son stood with flowers near her bed and waited patiently for her to wake up. A holiday breakfast was cooling on the table, and the box with the gift lay beside the pillow. I heard you. Now go away. Lucy turned away. At the moment, she could be compared to a broken toy, which, if you try, can be reassembled. Some parts could be replaced, some could be hot glued, and if it doesn't work out, disassemble it and send it for spare parts. Well, I didn't give in to my husband's entreaties. I didn't go home. Rubbing her hands on her cheeks flushed with frost, said Dina. Good for you. She was right not to go home. Let him worry. It's good for him. What an asshole. He sent Harry too. I'll never forgive him for that. As they say, neither himself nor his people. Dina sighed regretfully. The three of us were so good together. Looking out the window, she was silent for a while, twirling her empty cup in her hands. She cast a fleeting glance at Archie's car pulling away. It's up to you. He'll promise you anything you want right now. Mine promised me the same thing. I'm not your counselor in such matters. After divorce from my husband, I have a short conversation with men. But on the other hand, you can see that the man is worried. If I were you, I'd probably. Still, one chance. Mammy, thank you. Lucy left the table, giving her mom a peck on the temple. After 3 long days, she finally came home. Things with Archie were strained. They slept apart, communicated only when necessary. It had been a month, and the wound still bled and wouldn't heal. I was in no hurry to file for divorce, but I couldn't forgive either. Memory did not let go, and as soon as Lucy was going to forgive her husband, let go of the offense and never remember it, then necessarily met a neighbor with a snide grin on the platform and again began to hate herself for the weakness shown. Archie offered to change the apartment. They were planning to expand anyway. Tony would have his own room. Everyone's nerves would be just fine. It was strange that she hadn't met Harry once, but Selena had been there, trying to remind her of herself and piss her off with that cheeky, sweet smile of hers. Thank you, Ariana. It was delicious. Archie followed Lucy up from the table. His mother-in-law was visiting for the 2nd day, and it had to be said that the relationship between them had warmed a little with her arrival. In order to keep Ma had to sleep in the same bed. Each slept under his own blanket, but Archie was glad of that. It meant he had a chance and he would take it. No word from Selena. The neighbor turned out to be a very smart lady, immediately understood everything, took into account that no one was going to joke and flirt with her. Together with Lucy, they began to look through the advertisements for apartments for sale more often. Archie even chose a time and went to the bank for a consultation. Kids, I've been waiting for you to share the news with me. Ariana smiled enigmatically. She stroked her only grandson's head. She poured him tea, put another pancake on his plate, added a spoonful of sour cream. Which one? Lucy stopped in the doorway. She looked at her satisfied mother, then looked at her husband. Oh, come on. You're not ashamed. Why should I learn such news not from my children, but from the neighbors? Winked at her son-in-law. I don't know what the neighbors could have told you. Her heart, as if sensing another trick, treacherously turned over, beat at a rate of 200 beats per minute, and with each successive second, the speed of beats increased and increased. It seemed a little more in Lucy, like a jet airplane will get off the ground and fly around all the hard-to-reach neighborhoods of the city. Oh yeah, I met Selena at the playground today. She's so cultured and nice. I sighed, wiped a tear that rolled out of the corner of my right eye. She hinted that I would soon be a grandmother again. I even kissed her for such happy news. Finally, I thought I'd never get another grandson or granddaughter from you. Lucy, is there anything you want to tell me? Ariana's face shone like a polished samovar. She looked expectantly at her daughter, not noticing that she was nervous and could hardly restrain herself not to burst into tears once again. I can reassure you, I'm not pregnant, and in the near future to have children in my plans is not included in my plans. A satisfied smile flickered off Ariana's face. Obviously, she didn't like the answer and was surprised by it. She suddenly shrank back and seemed even smaller in stature. How could that be? Selena said Archie's gonna be a daddy again soon. Ridiculously said, and looked expectantly at the pale as chalk son-in-law. She realized from his twisted face that she'd said something she shouldn't have. She was always meddling where she wasn't asked. Ariana was angry at herself, at Selena, at the neighbor who'd stopped by, and was present during the conversation. Archie, why is Selena talking like that? Really? It's like something went off in my head. Immediately she looked at her grandson. Staring her eyes out, she covered her mouth with her hand. For a few seconds they stared at each other and only then rushed to her daughter, finally realizing what really happened. I'm going to go in there and strangle that bitch with my bare hands. Archie rushed to the door, grabbed the handle. Stop, Lucy shouted. Archie stopped without turning around. It was shameful to look his wife and mother-in-law in the eye. Where are you going? You're going to get yourself in trouble again. What will you do to her? You should have used your head earlier. His wife's voice was unaccustomedly ringing. She seemed to be on the verge of a nervous breakdown. Most of all annoyed mother-in-law, who could not calm down. What's going on? Archie's cheating on you? How can you stand it? My poor girl, whispered Ariana, giving her son-in-law a hateful look. Selena's lying. She saw us together and decided to break us up. Lucy, I'm begging you. Don't take her word for it. Be smart. We'll change apartments, move out, and never think of her again. I tried to calm everyone down. Ariana clutched her head. For a second, it seemed as if her balance was off. Her legs felt sluggish and unsteady. She grabbed her grandson on automatic and closed herself in the room with him. I had to calm down. I had to pull myself together. Keep my grandson away from all this filth. So much for Archie, the model family man. He's got a kid on the side. How can you do that? Why did Lucy put up with all this? Questions were pouring out like a cornucopia of questions. I wanted to get answers immediately, but she realized that the children did not care about her now. When she heard the front door slam, Ariana was alert and left the room. Where was Archie? Lucy was sitting on the ottoman by the door. Her large eyes were frozen in her pale face, staring at one point. He went to deal with Selena. Ariana frowned, shook her head. There was no point in pestering her daughter with questions. Let them deal with it themselves. She lowered herself onto the poof next to her, hugged her, kissed the top of her head. Everything will be fine, she exhaled, even though she knew perfectly well that nothing good was going to happen. Selena opened the door. Archie burst into the apartment. He could barely keep from throwing his fists at her. He tried hard to keep a cool expression on his face, but he couldn't keep it together. What did you say to my mother-in-law? Who asked you to spread your filthy tongue? Bitch. I was expecting Harry or Anna, but they weren't home. I warned you I'd throw you down the stairs. Keep walking and watch out, cause I'm gonna do it. You bet I will. You fucking asshole. His hands were shaking with anger, his eye twitching. He sighed convulsively, clasped his hands to his chest. Leaning back against the door, he looked at her with hatred from head to toe. What did you want? If you don't believe me, here's proof. Opened her purse, took out 2 tests. Take a look. I'm not in the mood for jokes. If you don't believe me, we can go to the doctor's office together tomorrow. And don't take it out on me. I was under the influence of alcohol too. It's both my fault. Whether you like it or not, we'll answer together. Selena opened the test. Archie saw 2 clear lines. She opened the second one, and it was the same. What are you hoping for? I love my wife, and I'm never gonna leave her. Do what you want, but I'll never admit this baby. I still have to prove it's mine. He was literally sick to his stomach, realizing what kind of shit he'd gotten himself into. He's gonna keep the baby. You have to be a complete idiot to take such a desperate step. What was more worrying was how his wife would take the news. She would definitely not forgive him for having a child. That wasn't all the news. Selena opened her purse again. I went to the clinic today. I had an ultrasound. How are you holding up? She held out a folded sheet. Archie didn't react. He didn't care about anything she said right now. You and I are going to have twins. She said in a tone as if she suspected he'd scream, resist wildly, accuse her of all sins that didn't exist. Archie swallowed nervously, grasped the handle on the front door. He looked at Salima incredulously, and to his surprise, he saw the look of confusion on her face. He couldn't think of anything yet but the feeling of irresponsibility and self-loathing he felt. Archie, calm down. I've heard you say many times that you love your wife. I used to love my husband too, but as you can see, I've fallen out of love. Don't worry, it's only hard at first, and then you get used to it. You have to take responsibility for your actions, and Lucy will never forgive you when she finds out we're having twins. Stop talking nonsense. Who'd want you with 3 kids? Use your head. I don't even want to hear about them. If you can't get rid of them yourself, I'll help you. You bet I will. Archie slammed the door. I didn't realize how I'd ended up in my apartment. His throat was tight and his mind was a mess. Lucy was sitting by the door, her eyes red with tears. The mother-in-law was ready to rush to her daughter's defense at any moment. Well, she asked in a nasally, mournful voice. How he wanted to calm her down now, to find the words to make her smile at last. After all, nothing in the world could lift his spirits, cheer him up, inspire him the way his beloved Lucy did. But, unfortunately, he could not make his wife happy. It's bad. Selena's expecting twins. She says it's mine. Our only hope is a DNA test, but it's too soon. What's the matter with the son-in-law? You've done your job, and now you don't know what to do. You can't climb a Christmas tree without getting your ass kicked. That's a hell of a job you did. You got the Negros twins. Why are you so down? I turned to Lucy, who was sniffling. I see you have no pride at all. Her husband cooks on the side of the children, and she cries and looks for excuses for him. That's a nice little arrangement you got there. Personally, I'm speechless. Lucy took a few breaths and exhaled. Then she looked at her mother. She, for full happiness, now lacked only her moralizing. Mom, let's sort this out ourselves. You came to see your grandson? Go see him. I didn't want to tell you anything, because I knew exactly how you'd react. Archie knelt down, took her hands and put them to his cheeks. Lucy flinched, glancing at her mother. Ariana shook her head negatively and, without another word, went defiantly into her grandson's room. Who is she, such an empty-headed girl? Doesn't she realize that this is it? There's no family as such anymore. Why cling to a man who betrayed her? And Salima is such a bastard. She makes eye contact, but behind her back, she does bad things. She's a hypocrite. She sank into a chair. Her grandson was drawing, trying to explain, but Ariana couldn't hear anything. Her thoughts were far away. She only smiled strangely, shook her head in agreement. She looked at the sketchbook and thought about how to keep her daughter from worry. Lucy, please don't go. Believe me, I feel bad too. Just the thought of not having you around makes me want to strangle Selena so that she never looms before my eyes again. I put my head in her lap. Oh my God, if he could turn back time, he would have lived this day differently. He would never have gotten drunk and cheated on his wife. Archie, how do you envision it? What kind of life will we have? You saw perfectly well that I was trying to forgive you. I hoped we'd move out, that things would work out eventually. But now things have changed. If Selena gives you 2 kids, I can't go through with it. Sighing heavily, she pulled his hands away. Barely lifting her legs, she headed into her son's room. Mom, can we temporarily live with Tony at your place? Not paying attention to her son's displeased look, she sank down on a chair. Lucy, please don't go. I don't know what Selena said. Nothing is known yet, and you're already ready to pack a suitcase and go to your mom. His mother-in-law's burning gaze made his cheeks burn. Archie was ready to fall through the ground, just to avoid her moralizing. The relationship between them was not bad. He always listened patiently to her advice, though he didn't always fulfill it, but for his wife's sake, he was ready to agree with a lot of things. Do you want Lucy to turn a blind eye? Ariana grinned wryly and gawked. That's not going to happen. My daughter didn't find herself in a dumpster. She slapped herself on the leg in frustration. Tears glistened in her eyes. Ariana, you don't know anything. I'm sorry, my fault. But it was one time. I was drunk and I wasn't thinking straight. Selena started blackmailing me after that. It didn't work. So she came up with a new trick. She's probably rubbing her hands together right now, sitting by the door, waiting for Lucy to roll the suitcase out. She played the whole thing out like a playbook, and you, Ariana, played along. I don't deny my guilt. I know I've acted like an asshole. I'm ready to suffer any punishment, especially since we don't know anything yet. Should we get to the bottom of this first? Ariana snorted unhappily, but thought about it. She looked at her daughter again. Yellow circles swam in front of her eyes. She felt like she was confused now and couldn't think straight. She could only exhale one long whistling sound. Woo-ha, how he talked. First he gave my daughter a nervous breakdown, and now he's talking like it's everyone else's fault, except for him. Maybe we should feel sorry for you, too, poor thing. Lucy sat on the chair and idly watched the conversation. Lucy, let's go to the bank together tomorrow. We'll take out a mortgage on the apartment we like. We'll move in and let our neighbors suffocate with envy. I realized that my mother-in-law was right, but I didn't give up hope of getting her on my side. Lucy bit her lip. The offer was tempting. She was thinking about it herself. If I'm to have any regrets. Regret, you need to calm down, hide deep emotions, and approach the problem with a cool head. She persisted to herself, as if she were memorizing a little poem. All right then. I'll stay. But if Selena does anything else, I don't know. My nervous system's not made of steel. I'm afraid I'm gonna snap again, and that would be the final decision. She won't. Not in time. We'll be moving soon. Archie clung to her, pulling her gently against him. A nervous shiver ran through his body. With a deep sigh, he burrowed into her hair. It seemed to Ariana that Archie was on the verge of bursting into tears. He clung to his wife as if she were a lifeline. He held on and was afraid to let go, lest he lose her again. Strange sounds were heard in the entryway. Selena put on her robe and went to the door, looked through the peephole. From the apartment across the hall, movers were taking out boxes. Loudly. They were talking, shouting, and even sometimes shouting at each other. They don't think about their neighbors. They themselves do not sleep and do not let people rest on a day off. Having smoothed my disheveled hair in front of the mirror, I couldn't resist opening the door. What's all this noise? Can't you keep it down? It's a day off, people are resting, and you're disturbing. Selena stepped out into the entryway, peered through the wide open doors. Maybe Lucy's finally leaving. It's about time. Archie was walking around the apartment, pointing his finger at what should be taken out first. Why are you leaving? I smiled my trademark smile. When she met his gaze, she blushed slightly. What business is it of yours? Archie snapped at her. What business is it of mine? I need to know. And if you want to escape from responsibility, decided to turn everything into a joke and smiled again. Step aside, young lady. Pulling the sofa out onto the landing, the young men pushed her back to the stairwell. Suddenly, she couldn't keep her footing. On the step and lost her balance. She tried to grab onto the railing, but she failed. Ah, came a scream. Unable to hold on, Celine slipped down the stairs. At the last moment, she tried to grab the railing, but she was spun around, slammed against the wall, and went tumbling down the stairs. One of the movers swore. The girl's dead. Dropped the couch. All four of them ran to Selena. She was lying on the landing between the floors like a broken, helpless doll and moaned softly. The young man bent over her, reached out his arms to lift her off the concrete floor. Don't touch her. We need to call an ambulance right away. There's no telling what might happen. Hearing the screams, Archie went out onto the platform. One of the movers was calling an ambulance. Another was trying to put his jacket under her head. From the third one's confused story, he realized that Selena had been hurt because of her curiosity. It was only a moment later that he saw Harry come out to the noise. The smell of the medication made his nose crinkle. His whole body ached. Her head was spinning and felt like it was going to burst from the unbearable pain. Selena took a deep, convulsive breath, as if she had finally escaped the stuffy, unventilated room. She opened her eyes, trying to realize where she was at the moment. When she saw the girl in the white robe, she wrinkled her face. Where am I? Her tongue felt like it was glued to the sky. She could barely utter a few pathetic sounds. Terrified that she couldn't say anything, she scrutinized the girl, trying to remember something. You're in the hospital. I'll get the doctor right away. The girl went out the door, and just a couple of minutes later the doctor entered the room, looking at the scans in his hands. He smiled contentedly and sat down on the edge of the bed. How are you feeling? Selena remained silent. He should understand how a man who feels like he's been crushed by a slab of concrete should feel, not ask stupid questions. You have a broken arm, a bruised right leg, a broken rib." He smiled guiltily, as if apologizing for the delay, and sighed heavily. "Unfortunately, the pregnancy could not be saved. I'm very sorry, but we did the best we could." Selena closed her eyes. She didn't want to see or hear anyone else. The doctor tried to calm her down, gave her some facts, asked her questions, but she didn't answer. She opened her eyes, looked at the ceiling, and dreamed of only one thing, that he finally left her alone. "Dina, hello. It's Harry. I visited you on January 1st. Of course I remember you, Harry. I wanted to say that I was tired of waiting for his long-awaited call, but modestly kept silent." She just smiled, imagining how Harry was embarrassed and couldn't make up his mind to ask her out. "Dina, please tell Lucy not to get upset anymore. Selena couldn't keep the pregnancy going. Let Archie sleep well. She's got nothing to blackmail them with." "Thank you, Harry, for such good news. It's cruel, but I think Lucy will be pleased." Dinah was silent. On the one hand, she was happy for her sister. She realized that Lucy was worried and that she and Archie often had conflicts on that basis. She herself had recently witnessed a little scandal, which had broken out in the middle of nowhere between the spouses. Lucy seemed to forgive, but Selena's pregnancy did not give her any peace. But on the other hand, she was a little upset. "I was hoping that Harry liked her a little bit." To encourage him to take decisive action, she dictated her phone number and made sure he put her number in his contacts. "I thought you might be asking me out on a date." Dina squeezed her eyes shut, but it didn't make her feel any better. When she saw Harry's bewildered face, she felt her own face flush with embarrassment. "Dina, I really want to ask you out on a date. Tomorrow at 6:30 p.m., I'll be waiting for you near your house." He made big pauses, as if every word was a high, steep cliff from which he was constantly falling down, and then rising again, and with incredible effort, climbing to the top. "There you go, asking for a date. Harry, if you..." Dina didn't finish. "Dina, please don't be late, because I have in my pocket 2 tickets to the concert of your favorite band, BI2. It starts at 7:30. How do you know that I love this band? I asked you in surprise. You said so yourself. I remembered. Yesterday I saw the poster, immediately remembered about you, and bought tickets without hesitation." Dina managed to restrain her impulse and not to jump, answering as if it meant nothing to her. "I'll see you then," she said calmly, and was the first to drop the call. Archie was screwing screws into the new kitchen set with a screwdriver. It was the second day he'd been assembling it. Today he planned to finish it and start drilling holes in the wall for the curtains. "Archie, Dina finally got a call from Harry. Invited her to the concert." Lucy bit her lip, as if she wanted to say something important but didn't dare. Archie sank back in his chair, ran his hand through his hair. They'd taken 3 days off work at their own expense. Scrubbing, 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 scrubbing. It was possible, of course, to make at least minor cosmetic repairs, but now it was not about that. The main thing was to move in sooner and preferably never again in life to meet with a shaken neighbor on the landing. Archie's eyes twitched involuntarily at the memory of her, and his mood disappeared at once. "Harry wanted me to tell you that Selena was crying because the doctors couldn't keep the pregnancy going." A grin appeared on his lips. Lifting his head, he closed his eyes and then sighed in relief. "Thank God, I can't even believe it. Is this woman really going to get off our backs?" Archie shook his head, smiled openly, and seemed to be dancing with joy. He stood up from his chair and reached for Lucy, but she stopped his impulse by putting her palms forward. "What a good boy Harry is. Lucy, darling, will you finally forgive me? How much longer?" He tried to get close again, but Lucy wouldn't let him. "Let him suffer, so that next time, before you do something, first think before you do it." Although she herself from such wonderful news dizzy, her palms were sweating, and every centimeter of her skin felt faint pulses of electric current. I was spoiled by the fact that she listened to her heart, believed, was not afraid, and decided to try to pass this way together with her husband. "Hey sis, how's it going?" Even by her voice, Lucy felt that Dina was in high spirits. Her optimism and vitality was enviable. Lucy washed her face, brushed her teeth, holding the phone in one hand while listening to her enthusiastic exclamations. She moved to the kitchen, occasionally trying to insert a little line and not stopping to be genuinely happy for her. Briefly, "What am I calling?" Harry has proposed to me. The registration is next Friday. It'll be modest. We'll sign. We'll go out to a restaurant that night. Oh, thank God. I'm so happy for you. Good for you, sister. You did it. The conversation kept coming back to me. It seems like a while ago, Dina was complaining about Harry seeing her and not getting a divorce. He was fine with it. He didn't want to hear anything about a wedding. And now this sudden turnaround. Who'd have thought it? When Lucy visited them, she often thought that Harry was a very good and kind man. She was sure he would make an excellent family man, a caring and attentive father. Selena probably regretted that she hadn't appreciated and horned in on such a husband. Dina said that when Harry filed for divorce, Selena came to her, appealing to her conscience and asking her not to leave Anna without a father. The thing she hated most was leaving his apartment. Harry was worried about it too, but under Dina's careful guidance, Selena had moved in with her parents, leaving them a one-bedroom apartment which they were now renovating. That wasn't all the news. Lucy held her breath. What else could she surprise her with? Harry and I are expecting a baby. 8 weeks. I haven't told anyone. I was afraid of jinxing it, she whispered in one breath, as if she were really afraid to share her innermost thoughts. That's news, that's news. Harry must be over the moon, right? You could have guessed the answer beforehand and not asked any stupid questions, because I was absolutely sure that Harry was shining with happiness like a polished nickel. He was fine. He proposed right away, or I'd still be a bride, Dina chuckled. Harry's voice came through the phone. Dina said goodbye quickly, reminded him again about next Friday, and dropped the call. The crowd in the restaurant was small. Close relatives, 2 unmarried bridesmaids on the bride's side, a few co-workers, and 1 single friend on the groom's side. The evening was in full swing. From the conversations, music, and laughter, there was a deafening noise in the hall. The air conditioners were running at full capacity, but it was too stuffy in the hall. Waiters were knocked down, removing dirty dishes from the tables, serving drinks, mineral water, caraques with juice. One of Dina's co-workers turned out to be an old acquaintance of Archie's, so old that they didn't recognize each other right away. Archie sat next to Lucy, hardly drinking. With Tony, they were more into mineral water and juices. Once in a while he went out for a breath of fresh air and a smoke. When he bumped into an old acquaintance on the street, he was transformed and cheerful. Archie, just a little longer and we'll go home. Tony is already tired, shouted in my ear when her husband raised the glass, reached for his acquaintance, choked and drank in one gulp. Shaking his head approvingly, Archie patted his son on the head, picked up his cigarettes, waved to Kathy, and they went outside together. You look like you're having a good time. Ariana glared at her son-in-law. Her heart was not in place, as if sensing something wrong. Mom, don't start. Archie's going to smoke, and then we'll go home, Lucy snapped. What am I supposed to do? Stand next to him with a gun? There was nothing wrong with it if they talked. She'd give a lot to keep Archie from getting drunk again, pull himself together and go home. She tried not to show it, but looking at her husband's behavior, she had a bad feeling that something was about to happen. Archie, let's go. I tugged on his sleeve again. When I saw my mom's judgmental look, I pressed my lips together. Tomorrow she'll be moralizing again and talking about how Archie had promised, but he couldn't give up his bad habits. Let's sit a little longer. I'd like to talk to Kathy. I haven't seen her in 20 years. You know, I didn't even recognize her. But she hadn't come up to me, I'd have walked right past her. I'll wait for Katie to move closer to them. Ask the waiter to bring clean plates for her. Archie, I'm warning you. If you're not on your way home in 10 minutes, Tony and I will leave without you. It's getting late. It's time for my son to rest. I understood. We met some old acquaintances. We talked. We shared memories. But your family is with you. Don't you realize you can't forget about them either? Tony went over to his father, urging him to go home. Lucy took her phone out of her purse and ordered a cab. Archie had a drink with Kathy, said goodbye, and headed for the door. In the car, Lucy didn't say anything. But as soon as they crossed the threshold, frowning her eyebrows, she was about to say everything she thought about him. But she realized that while they were driving, her husband was even more drunk, and there was no point in appealing to his conscience today. What's wrong again? Archie hiccuped loudly when he caught her puzzled look and looked in his pockets, but found nothing there but a lighter. He took off his jacket and tossed it carelessly on the ottoman. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Tonight go undress and go to bed. I caught myself thinking that maybe I should have listened to Dina, not to believe my husband and not to give him that one proverbial chance. Archie lasted exactly a year and a half. In that time, all the bad things have faded from his memory, and now, having forgotten his promises, and now he's ready to show off his skills with renewed vigor. At that moment, Lucy's phone rang. The picture of a happy bride appeared on the screen. "Hello," said affectionately, putting the phone on speaker. "Lucy, Archie has forgotten his purse in the restaurant. What am I supposed to do with it?" she said tiredly. "Dina, give it to your mom. She was going to visit us tomorrow." How could she do such a reckless thing and not even remember the bag? I told him not to take it and to put all his stuff in her purse. "Aunt Ariana left after you. I called so you wouldn't worry. If you don't mind, I'll take her with me. Don't let Archie worry. We'll bring it back safe and sound." "Did I forget my purse?" Archie sobered up a little bit and jumped into the conversation. He got as excited as if he had bars of gold leaf in there. "Dina, I'll call a cab now, and I'll be at the restaurant in half an hour." He dropped the call, and not paying attention to Lucy's mutterings, ordered a cab. "I've got my phone, wallet, passport, money, salary card. I'll be quick. 1 foot here, 1 foot there. How am I gonna do without my phone? Think about it. The car was supposed to be here in 5 minutes." Feeling an unkind look, he hugged her and smilingly reached out. "Don't worry, I'll be there soon. I'll come back in the same car." Lucy did her best to block the road, to evoke guilt. She put her hand on the latch, suggesting that she think carefully and not go anywhere, not to bring the situation to streams of tears, smearing makeup, and not to open conflict. She tried to explain that tomorrow he would regret it, but it would be too late. But Archie kissed her on the cheek, only grinned crookedly, once again assured that nothing terrible would happen, and pushed his wife aside, literally jumped out of the apartment, tightly closing the door behind him. "Archie, what brings you here? If memory serves, you went home?" Katie was standing outside with a friend. The guests were slowly making their way home. A couple of minutes later, the happy newlyweds appeared outside. "Archie, here's your purse." When Dina saw that he was talking to Katie again, she was furious. She grabbed him by the sleeve, dragged him away from her, and hissed at him so no one would hear. "Hadn't you had enough trouble with Salima? You're relieved, so you want to do it again?" I sighed heavily from exhaustion. "I just got off the phone with Lucy. She's worried about you, you asshole. She can't sleep. Her eyes are wet. She'd kill you." After handing him a purse, they tried to get him and Harry into a cab. "Dina, you've got a husband now, so worry about him. Lucy and I can handle it. I'll see KB off and I'll go straight home, I promise." It was no use arguing with him now. Without a second's hesitation, he grabbed Katie's hand, put her in the back seat with him, and ordered the cab driver to go to the address. What an idiot. He'll be sorry tomorrow, but it'll be too late. I warned my sister that people don't change, but she didn't want to hear anything. Here you are, one extra drink and a man as unrecognizable as if a demon had taken over. Seeing the car taking Archie away, apparently anywhere but home, she said with a sigh of regret. "It was the day of our registration. It's unlucky, it's unlucky. For some it's a holiday, for others it's a sorrow. Poor Lucy. Don't make a fuss." Archie wasn't so drunk that he'd sleep with someone he didn't know. Harry, gently stroking his wife's tummy, tried to defend his relative. They didn't notice when the cab driver stopped the car near Oba's house. "Would you like to come in for a cup of coffee, or are you afraid your wife will scold you?" Katie said with a grin. When she saw that he put his car to the terminal, she waited until he paid and only then opened the door. "The main thing is that your boyfriend doesn't get jealous of me," Archie smiled. He was struggling with two incredibly strong feelings right now. The first was self-loathing for not being able to contain his impulse to go home again. And the second was the sheer pleasure of talking to a girl who had once lived in their yard and whom he had almost never noticed. He wasn't going to cheat on Lucy. His memory had not yet forgotten the nasty story with Selena, but he couldn't deny himself the pleasure of spending time in good company. And the wife. Lucy's gonna be pissed off, but she'll understand. She recently went to a class reunion without him and nothing. There was no Aryan in the entryway. It smelled like sewage and there were gnats flying around. Katie couldn't get the key in the keyhole for a long time. Archie couldn't stand it, pulled out his cell phone, turned on his flashlight. He was about to turn around and leave, but when he heard, "What would I do without you?" he decided to come in for a few minutes. Come on in. Make yourself at home. You cannot worry. After the divorce from her husband, I live alone. Undressing, sweetly purred, throwing shoes in different directions. Come into the kitchen. I'll be right there. She changed into a terry robe and went into the kitchen again. Took out instant coffee sugar. Put 2 mugs on the table. Turned on the kettle. You know, I should probably go. When he saw the missed call from Lucy, he mumbled guiltily. He smiled and started to get up. The mugs were black inside. Archie couldn't understand how they could be used for drinking. What about the coffee? Did I boil the kettle for nothing? You better order a cab first. This is such a rough neighborhood. By the time the car arrives, you'll have time not only to drink coffee, but even to sleep. Archie looked at Kathy incredulously. I'm telling you the truth. You've seen the road, haven't you? It's all bumps and potholes. So call your wife so she doesn't lose you. The car will be here in an hour, maybe 2. Pouring boiling water, she said as a matter of course. I wasn't embarrassed at all, because it was the truth. The car did not arrive for Archie until an hour and a half later. After learning the address, cab drivers refused to go to the neighborhood. The operator called several times, asked to wait first 20, then 30 minutes, then she postponed the departure. Archie was ready to walk to the highway, but Kathy dissuaded him. Convincingly, she explained that the local gang was not slumbering and would gladly rob him, strip him down to nothing. When finally the long-awaited text message came on the phone that a cab had arrived at the entrance, Archie stuffed the phone in his pocket and practically ran out of the apartment without remembering about his bag. He came to his senses only in the car, but he didn't go back. He paid the fare by phone number and went home with a clear conscience. From the anxious thoughts of the heart clenched with such force that it seemed a little more and Lucy just will not survive, will suffocate. From resentment wanted to cry, but there were no tears. When the lock on the front door creaked, she tried to pull herself together and pretend that she was quite calm about her husband's behavior. As she lay awake and stared at the ceiling, she thought of a plan that she wasn't going to tell Archie about. At least not now. Let him go to bed. His true attitude toward her he'd shown. There would be no more excuses. There will be no second chances. There'll be nothing at all. Still, she forced herself to get up, put on her robe and look into his shameless eyes. Lucy, I was just walking Katie out. We talked. We shared memories. Nothing happened between us. If you don't believe me, you can call her. I have nothing to hide. He was completely calm, absolutely sure that nothing fatal had happened, that he could go on with his life, as if he were talking about ordinary things at the 4th hour of the night. And she should get into his situation and not dwell on such worldly trifles. I'll make your bed on the couch. I threw it over my shoulder. Why? His face stretched with surprise. On the bob, glittered angrily with her eyes, and with a quick step headed for the living room. Realizing that it is better not to argue with her now, silently agreed. Throwing his clothes on the armchair, with a long sigh, he collapsed on the sofa and fell asleep almost instantly. In the morning, Lucy was up bright and early. Archie was sleeping on the sofa with a clear conscience. Her hand involuntarily reached for the phone. She wanted to call Dina. I didn't know what she would ask, but I hoped that my sister would tell me everything without any leading questions. Dina, did I wake you up? I asked, feeling my heart jumping out of my chest. I realized it was too early, but I couldn't wait any longer. If you tell me now that your husband did not come to sleep, I will tear him into 2 halves with my bare hands. Yawning, she said in a sleepy voice. He came at the 4th hour. Now he sleeps like a murderer, and I do not know what to do. Sobbed, wiping her tears. Lucy, I know what you mean. Get that asshole out of here. Harry and I sent him home. But what about? I didn't think about you. That Don Juan of La Mancha went to see Katie off. They left together in a cab. It was about 12 o'clock. Where and what he was doing all that time, I don't know. Duna literally burst into tears after a brief pause. She panted with anger, ready to take Archie down with her bare hands and beat the crap out of his head any way she could. I get it. Thank you for not hiding anything from me, she thanked breathlessly. Her heart stabbed with self-pity. Now Lucy felt frank dislike for her husband and even disgust. In her head, there was a single thought that it was time to end it all. Otherwise, she'd have to deal with it all over again, but she didn't need to. Archie's cell phone buzzed. When she read the message, Lucy was even more convinced of her desire for a final divorce. Hey, how'd you get home? Since you didn't come back, your wife didn't kick you out of the house. You left your purse at my place. The message ended with a laughing face. When Lucy saw that Archie had opened his eyes, she dialed the tenant's number. John, good morning. I'm sorry to disappoint you. I'm giving you a week to look for a new place to live. She was silent, listening to the unhappy exclamations of her companion. I understand, John, but I want you to understand. There's been a disagreement in our family. My husband and I are getting a divorce. I can stay at my mom's for a while, but I can't stay there much longer. I won't throw you out on the street, but try to get out of the apartment as soon as possible. I understand you, John, but I want you to understand me too. If I didn't have a problem in my family, no one would touch you. No, John, we won't change our minds. Okay, I understand. I'll be waiting for your call. Goodbye. Watching Archie's surprised face was disgusting. A year and a half later, it happened again. The husband got drunk again, cheated, embarrassed the guests. Spent the night with some strange girl he didn't know. And if all this had not happened to her, it would be possible to laugh. But Lucy was not up to jokes. Another low blow from her beloved husband. Lucy, what's going on? Why are you kicking out the tenants? Stretching my memory, I remembered fragments of last night. How he had rushed out of the house because his soul demanded the continuation of the holiday. How Dina had sent him home, which was not part of his plans. He remembered his youth. Memories came flooding back. Who would have thought that the angular, pimply girl would turn into such a beautiful and self-aware woman and quite interesting conversationalist? It seemed only worth it to reach out and take. I thought about intimacy, but came to my senses in time. Maybe while riding in a cab, I sobered up a little, or maybe I thought about Dina's words. To his shame at that moment, did not think about his wife's emotions that would be caused by his behavior. Lucy, what are you doing? I give you my word of honor that nothing happened between us. Confusedly spoke. A drop of cold sweat rolled down his spine. Why'd you go for the purse? Yeah, you should drink less, and in my case you can't drink at all. Sighed heavily, rubbed his temples with his hand. He grinned, remembering how he couldn't wait half the night for a cab. Who would have thought that the city still has such impassable places? If you don't believe me, I can call Katie for you right now. I have nothing to fear. I confidently picked up my phone. Why? Lucy looked at her husband in surprise. I saw everything yesterday with my own eyes. Say whatever you want. No one will believe you anyway. Today my son and I will go to my mom. As soon as John will vacate the apartment, you and I will call and decide who will move there. I'm filing divorce papers on Monday. There's no point in stalling. Lucy, are you crazy? Kitten, take it easy. Take it down a notch. I wasn't gonna cheat on you with anybody. You know damn well I don't want anyone but you. I realize that I behaved badly, but you don't get divorced for little things like that. I'm sorry, I screwed up again, but I promise you that's the last time. He tried to come closer, to hug her, but Lucy elbowed him and shoved him away from her, as if she had driven away an annoying fly. Don't touch me. Go back for your purse. They're waiting for you there. You can keep your hands to yourself, but don't touch me. You disgust me. Don't get your dirty hands all over me. I don't meet anyone. I have a wife. I'm not interested in other women. I told you nothing happened between us. If you don't believe me, I'll swear anything. I have nothing to hide. Go here, Katie. You can get your purse too. No one's holding you. Let's go. I looked at the door. Tony wiped his eyes, looking disgruntled, as if his parents had interrupted his morning nap. Mom, Dad, why are you yelling like that? Son, it's time to get up. Now you and I will have breakfast and go to Grandma. A little thought added. I'm warning you that Daddy and I are splitting up. Looking at Archie, Tony frowned. Is it because Daddy left yesterday? Yeah, son. Dad came home this morning. Do you remember how he was prancing around with that strange aunt yesterday? How you talked him into going home? Lucy bit her lower lip. She didn't want to burden her son with problems. But on the other hand, Tony was already a big boy. He'd be going to school next year. She knew it would be hard for him to take the news. But hell, he's got to realize his father's wrong. Daddy, where have you been? He said coldly. Son, Daddy's been at Aunt Kathy's. I hope you don't give him ultimatums and stand up for him this time. You're a big boy now. You've seen how Daddy behaved. I don't want to do it again. I wiped away an unsolicited tear. I didn't want to show my weakness, but my breath betrayed me. Breathing heavily, I felt as if I were dying every time I took my penultimate breath. "It won't happen again, I promise," Archie said, gulping loudly, trying to put a smile on his face. "I've heard that before. Like a stupid fool, I hummed my ears and believed you. I hoped you'd come to your senses. And then yesterday you showed your true colors again. You may have looked like an alpha male in Kathy's eyes, but to me you were a liar and a traitor again. I won't let you humiliate yourself again." Looking through the contents of the closet, I tried to figure out what else I hadn't put in my bag. I wanted to leave the apartment quickly, to run anywhere, to hide, just not to see his face. If it hadn't been for the baby, she might have thrown her fists at him, not forgetting to spice her actions up with some excellent profanity. "Lucy," trying to hub again. "Get away from me. Don't ever touch me again." Snorting, she shoved him away. I slid my eyes over his miserable face. I folded my arms across my chest as if in defense. Don't let him get his hopes up. Their marriage had come apart a year and a half ago, and yesterday it had fallen apart. "Stay with Tony. I'll be right out." "Ooh, that would be great. I didn't offer you that option. I didn't think you'd take it. Thank you for making concessions." Lucy pointed in the direction of the front door. "Pack your things and let's get out of here. I'm warning you. I'm not forbidding you to see your son, but forget about me. I'm going to leave now, but only so you can think about it and calm down. I swear I never had the slightest thought of embarrassing you, let alone changing. Son, do you believe me?" Tony lowered his eyes. "No need to use the forbidden technique and put pressure on your son. He might believe you, but I'll never be able to. And no amount of complaining is gonna work on me. We've been over this. You should have thought of that last night when you were drunk. Your son was crying to you to get Daddy to come home. But for some reason, Dad didn't give a damn about us last night. Where are we? The woman of your dreams named Kathy loomed before your eyes." As Archie slowly packed his things, Lucy cradled her distraught son in her arms. She could close her eyes again. She knew her husband well enough to know that there had been no physical affair. 100% guarantee, of course, no one could give. But constantly to be on a powder keg and to wait when it will burst. So a pleasure. Thoughts are material. They can drag you into such depths that you can't go far from madness. She sighed heavily as the front door closed behind her husband. Tony whimpered like a little puppy. He buried his face in her chest. Lucy ruffled his hair, kissed his head, and whispered so softly that Tony felt rather than heard her words. "Don't take offense to me, son. He'll always be Daddy to you. No one will forbid you to communicate. Hard times will pass, sooner or later, but I promise you that everything will be fine with you." Completely confused, Archie stood on the porch and did not know what to do next. He turned around, barely restraining himself from turning back. Once again to apologize to Lucy, to try to get through to explain. But knowing his wife's stubborn character, he was absolutely sure that it was too early to do it now. Throwing his bag on his shoulder, he walked leisurely to the parking lot. I got into the car, opened the windows on my side. Staring stupidly at the windshield, I racked my brains and tried to think of something. My wife's voice still sounded in my head as an ominous whisper, scattering in different directions disappointing thoughts, like scraps of written and unnecessary sheets of paper. I put the key in the ignition and turned it on automatic, gripped the steering wheel with my hands. He sighed long and drove himself without realizing where he was going. For the first half an hour I could think of almost nothing. I drove aimlessly along familiar streets. If earlier, stopping at a red light, wildly irritated. I was freaking out that I had to constantly slow down and wait for the green light to come on. But today there was no hurry. Calmly past pedestrians and perhaps for the first time in his life, realized that no one was waiting for him and he had nowhere to hurry. Sooner or later, you have to pull over somewhere. The tank was running out of gas, and for that he had to stop at Kathy's and pick up his purse. The mere thought of going back to that rough neighborhood made me sick to my stomach. There was an unpleasant residue from last night's encounter, but there was no choice. Having approached the house, I sat in the car for a long time, not knowing how to take myself by the scruff of the neck and go up to the 5th floor. But there was no choice. Kathy was waiting for him, because he couldn't go to her house without calling her first. Katie opened the door. The apartment smelled deliciously of baked goods. Archie almost choked on his own saliva, remembering that he hadn't eaten anything since this morning. "Hi, come in." Kathy was wearing the same terry cloth robe. There wasn't an ounce of makeup on her face, and her hair was hastily gathered into a sloppy bun. Archie couldn't help noting that without makeup and sober, It was hard to recognize her as beautiful today. "I'm getting my purse," he said dryly. "You're not even coming in?" Smiling openly, Katie leaned back against the wall and pressed her hands to her chest, scrutinizing his face as if looking for scratches or signs of beating. "Did your wife give you a beating last night when she couldn't find any abrasions on his face?" she asked. If her ex-husband had acted like that, she would have scratched his face or something worse. "I bet she would. Now I don't know how to get my wife to forgive me." I grabbed my purse off the shelf, and I could barely keep myself from throwing it to throw it at the wall like it was to blame for all my troubles. "If I were your wife, I'd be offended too. I should have listened to Dina's words yesterday and not go anywhere with you." Shrugged. "But I don't need to talk about it now. Dina already scolded me this morning. I told her that nothing happened between us, but she just laughed and didn't believe me." Shrugged her shoulders guiltily again, as if she didn't understand how to behave in this situation. Whether to justify myself or keep silent and not to bring up the subject anymore. When she saw Archie's distraught face, she looked away and quickly changed the conversation. "Why don't you have some breakfast? I made pancakes. No jam, just butter." "No thanks. I don't have an appetite. I just said it." After her words, the appetite really disappeared, and the mere sight of pancakes with butter made me disgusted. What a goat. Couldn't convince Dinka, I guess I wanted to. "Suit yourself. It's my business to offer." She looked at him with resentment. Archie only turned silently, opened the door, and threw over his shoulder. Goodbye. Left the apartment, considering his options and thinking about where to go next. When Lucy heard her name, she turned around cautiously, as if considering whether to stop or to pretend she hadn't heard and skip away. "Hi, what are you doing here?" A guilty smile appeared on her husband's face. The fact that they hadn't seen each other for 2 days made her sad. The words that he missed you so much, that he wanted to come over, but he knew you wouldn't talk. Sitting at work, I figured that at lunchtime my wife would rush to file for divorce. I planned to intercept her, delay her, try to talk her into taking her time. "I came to ask you to lunch." When I saw her surprised face, I was embarrassed. "Lucy, we need to talk. I can't find a place to talk. Don't you ever wonder where I am and what's wrong with me? I miss my son. Can I pick him up from daycare today?" Lucy wanted to leave as soon as possible. Lunch was not a rubber lunch. She had, of course, warned her boss that she would probably be late this afternoon, but she was still in a hurry. There was a lawyer waiting for her at the corner coffee shop. She didn't want to be late for her first meeting. "Archie, don't be pathetic. Forget we were ever together. Let's face it, there's no family anymore. You can see your son anytime you like, just don't forget to give me a heads up." There was no point in ranting and raving. "I'm sorry, I have an emergency. I'm in a hurry," I answered vaguely. "Lucy, wait." I grabbed the bridge of my nose. "I'm sorry." There was silence in the air. Lucy had already opened her mouth just to get off his back, to say she didn't hold a grudge. "Lucy, I want you to know that I'm against the divorce. There's no point in promising again. You won't believe me anyway. But if you don't forgive me, you know that I don't want anything. I'll leave everything to you. I'll only take my car and my personal belongings." For 2 days I've been thinking about how to impress my wife and prove my love by my actions. What kind of nonsense is that? Where are you going to live? Lucy was stunned, and I remembered. Dinah told me that Katie had her own apartment. I can see your point. An inexplicable resentment stabbed at her heart, though it was silly to be offended. Maybe she hadn't let go of it yet, and it was a nasty feeling, like elementary female jealousy. She grinned and walked quickly forward, ignoring the words that followed. What does this have to do with Katie? Why on earth would I want to live with her? Why do I need her? How do I get it through to you that there is nothing between us and there never will be? She's not my type at all. Oh my God, that's ridiculous. I live with my parents and I don't need anyone but you. Lucy stopped. Something had to be done about it. Archie was following her, talking and literally breathing down her neck. You all done. Thank you for your generosity. But if you're hoping to win me over with your gifts, you're hoping for nothing. You won't succeed. I won't forgive you. And I won't change my mind. Lucy quickened her stride and turned around before she rounded the corner. Archie stood in one place and stared after her. 3 months later, they were divorced. Archie fulfilled his promise. Both apartments left Lucy, and all his belongings moved to his parents. A month after the divorce, Archie's mother died, and his father outlived his mother by exactly 40 days. Mom, can Dad stay with us for a while? Lucy turned pale with surprise and almost dropped her fork from her hands. What do you mean he's staying with us? She looked at Tony, then looked at Archie. Her ex-husband was sitting at the head of the table at her father-in-law's wake, accepting condolences and slowly pouring alcohol into his grief. Archie was the last thing she needed was to show off at a wake. Why hadn't she thought to warn him beforehand? Son, what do you mean he's going to live? Daddy's got his own apartment. You better whisper in Daddy's ear not to drink anymore. Tony leaned toward his father. Lucy turned away from them, listened to the memories of her father's sister. Angelica recalled their barefoot childhood, then slipped into the school years and remembered to mention her late mother-in-law. Lucy, will you let me stay with you temporarily? Archie asked in an intoxicated voice. He leaned over so he could see her better. Archie, let's talk about this later. Lucy screwed up her face and waved it away, struggling to contain herself and feeling herself boiling up inside. Later, is that when? He interjected. When everyone has dispersed. Trying to be good for everyone? You think they'll love you for it and pay you back. You made up some bullshit. You divorced me for no reason at all. And my parents, Lucy, were not ironclad. They were very worried. That's the outcome. He looked around at the others, sighed heavily, spread his hands, pulled Tony to him, kissed the top of his head. I have one son left. Everyone was silent, some of them looking at Lucy with disapproval, whispering, talking quietly among themselves. Archie, we're here to honor my brother, not to decide which of you is to blame, his aunt said, whispering in Lucy's ear that his nephew was just like his dead father. Just like him, even the same habits. It can happen. He was a good man, but sober. He rarely drank, but he did when he was young. I put my arm around her shoulders. Listen, Lucy, why don't you let Archie stay with you for a few days? He's having a hard time. I've been asking him to stay with me, but he won't let us be cramped. I can understand that. It won't be easy for Archie and Artagor. I don't know when Ludka and her family will move out. Probably never. Angelica looked at her nephew with a heavy sigh, and Archie, as if feeling his guilt, put the shot glass on the table without drinking any more. He took cigarettes from the table and left the table. Tony followed his father. Lucy said goodbye to Aunt Lena and, citing a headache, hurried after them. Am I disturbing you? To her surprise, there was no one else on the street but them. Tony pointed a finger at his father and he nodded his head in agreement. Tony, we should go home, she said with a chill in her voice. After all, she was an ex, and she didn't have to be here. All the more to listen to ridiculous accusations. You've got a nerve. Blaming it on her and embarrassing her in front of people. Mom, I'll stay with Dad, and then we'll go back to our house together. Cuddled up to Dad, Archie looked up at her and stroked Tony's head. Lucy, please stay. I'm sorry, I didn't realize what I was saying. It's just everything came up. The divorce, the death of my parents, and he shook his head, barely holding back the tears. I won't drink anymore. We'll sit a little longer and then we'll all go home together. Don't chase me away. I cannot stay alone now. It's hard for me. As it happens, I have no one to turn to but you and my son. People began to slowly disperse. Archie's relatives came out into the street, explaining that they had a long way to go. They expressed their condolences and all of them went to the bus park nearby. Lucy stood there at a loss. She didn't want to stay here any longer. Even more, she didn't want Archie to stay with her. And it was embarrassing to say no. Anyway, Tony was his son. Even though they're divorced, Archie's not a stranger. He pays alimony, takes his son to the movies on weekends, visits entertainment centers with him. Tony, as if sensing that she hesitates, clung to his father and does not leave him for a minute. All right, I'll stay. Only Archie, please do not touch me again and do not accuse me of anything. Lucy was angry, realizing that now was not the time to settle things, but she couldn't stop. What he's doing? He'd already pinned her parents' death on her. I'm sorry about what happened, but what does it have to do with me? People came outside. Lucy was silent. Archie was distracted again for a while. I'm sorry, what did you want to tell me? He asked again. It's okay, let's go to the gym. For the first time that day, Lucy saw a smile on his face, albeit a forced one. Apparently thinking that the incident was over, he opened the door in front of her, held it open for her, let his son go in, and they went into the hall together. To her surprise, Archie kept his promise. No more drinking, no more unpleasant conversations. When he got home, he felt like a squeezed lemon. He was tired. When he came out of the shower, with Lucy's permission, he made his own bed on the sofa and barely had time to put his head on the pillow and immediately fell into a deep sleep. In the morning, Lucy awoke to the smell of scrambled eggs. She glanced at the alarm clock on the nightstand. She could still sleep for 20 minutes. She and Tony don't eat in the morning. Her son eats breakfast at daycare, and she drinks tea at work at 10 o'clock. She threw on her robe, still yawning, and went into the kitchen. Standing on the threshold, she saw Archie working on the stove. Barely able to tear herself away from the sight, she broke the silence. "Good morning." Archie flinched in surprise. "You startled me." "Good morning." Surprise didn't work out. I wanted to set the table nicely and then wake you up. I took out a knife, sliced the bread. I put 3 plates on the table. I found some nice napkins in the cupboard. "Can't sleep?" She took the capsule out of the box, put it in the machine. I reached up and took a mug from the shelf. When she heard confused breathing behind her back, she instantly turned around. I looked at Archie standing next to me in surprise, noting to myself that despite the fact that the former tried to seem cheerful, he looked very tired, haggard, and one might even say, exhausted. When I noticed how his gaze instantly changed, his pupils dilating and his eyes darkening, I tried not to spasm and quickly reminded him, "If you start getting handsy, you'll go straight home. I'm warning you so that later there will be no offense." Spoke clearly, understandably. No smiling, no rushing, no flirting. Archie felt like he'd been splashed with cold water. He wanted to pounce on her, to kiss her, but Archie held back. He moved a safe distance away from her. He was afraid that by doing so, he would destroy the fragile little world that had recently formed between them. It was frustrating, though, the circumstances that had brought him back here again. "Lucy, I just wanted to say thank you for taking me in. If you only knew how good it's been for me." "Archie, let's make a deal so we don't have any unfounded complaints about each other later. My son and I gave you a helping hand in your time of need. That's the end of it. There will be no intimacy between us." Taking a sip of coffee, she set the mug on the table. Archie's cheerful mood instantly faded from her perceptive gaze. Gritting his teeth, he gritted his teeth, and he was silent for a few seconds. "I know what you mean. It's just hard to control yourself when you're around. Like the good old days, I want to touch you, to kiss you. I still can't get used to the fact that we're divorced." Just looking at my wife made everything inside shrink to such a size that it was hard to breathe. Swallowing the lump in his throat, he lowered his eyes. The crooked smile, which was more sorrowful, turned into a loud and long sigh. "Okay." Quickly finished my coffee and rinsed the mug. I went to wake Tony up. "It's your day off, and I can't be late for work. Go get ready. I'll wake my son up myself. I'll feed him. Take him to daycare." Not paying attention to her surprised look, poured himself a glass of cold water, drained it, and ran to the children's room. Lucy was sitting at her desk when Dina called her on her cell phone. "Hi sis, how did you go to your father-in-law's funeral yesterday? I hope your ex-boyfriend didn't make a mess this time and didn't hit on anyone." When she heard Archie was staying with her temporarily, she groaned. "Lucy, have you lost your mind? Why did you let him in? Before you know it, he'll be back in your bed. Is that what you want? By the way, Katie's always asking about him. She even wanted to ask me to go to the funeral, but when I told her you'd be there, she was surprised and changed her mind." "Dina, what are you talking about? We're officially divorced. If they even start dating, I don't care. I was just there for him in his time of need. That's it. In 3 or 4 days, I'll give you a clear hint to leave. You can tell Katie what I said. Tell her to try to make him feel better about being alone. He needs someone to lean on right now." Glancing at her coworkers, she neatly folded the documents into a folder. I took a hole punch out of my locker and placed it on the order signed by the director. I wanted to say goodbye and drop the call. "Come to our house tonight. Harry's bringing a friend of his. The 4 of us can sit and talk. He has such a good friend. I like him so much. He's single, by the way. He was in a common law relationship if something happened. Split up. Let us introduce you to him." Dina went on and on about Vassie's friend, but Lucy wasn't listening. She couldn't get in to stop this unnecessary conversation. It was not enough for her to go to the viewing. She was not going to waste time on such nonsense, especially at the moment there was no desire to get acquainted. "Dina, stop praising your friend. I don't need it. I tried to stop it. Then just come over tonight. Let Archie have some alone time with his son, and you can spend the evening with me. It's been a while, and I have something very, very important to tell you. I warn you, this is not a phone call. There was silence. The coworkers were starting to look at Lucy. Talking for a long time on the phone during working hours was not welcome. At the planning meetings, they constantly made remarks about it. Okay, I'll be there. See you tonight. Lucy let out a sigh of relief. Dina was so restless. I can't believe she'd come up with something like this. Having loaded herself with urgent work, which should have been done yesterday, Lucy did not notice how the time flew by and she had to go home. Remembering that she hadn't warned Archie yet, she dialed his phone number. Archie, hello again. Can you pick up Tony today? I was just about to call you. I picked Tony up early today. We're making dinner with him right now. In the background, you could hear his son's happy voice. Tony asked Archie something and Archie told him to wait and not to touch anything without him. Have dinner without me tonight. I'll be late. Ivan Timofeyevich has me busy with work. I don't have time for anything. I'll have to stay late. I lied on purpose. Because I knew that if she told the truth, Archie would come to Dina's and he wouldn't care that he wasn't invited. Lucy, my son and I tried. I went to the cemetery with my aunt this morning. I thought you and I would have a symbolic memorial tonight. Aunt Lena gave us some pancakes. She made a whole mountain of them this morning. Lucy wanted to postpone the meeting and go home tonight, but when she saw Dina on the second line, she realized she couldn't do it. Archie, don't wait up for me. Have dinner without me. I'll be late. I'm sorry, but I can't talk. I'm on line 2. When she heard her sister's excited voice on the phone, she said she'd be at her place in about an hour. Well, finally. Opening the doors, Dina threw herself around her neck and kissed her. Let me at least look at you. She gave you a little twirl. She gently stroked her bulging tummy. I can't wait for the toxicosis to go away. My legs are swelling. Harry came out of the kitchen. Hello, Lucy. Why are you standing on the doorstep? Come on in. Lucy handed Harry the package. On the way to the supermarket, she bought a bottle of red wine, olives, a loaf of raw sausage, a box of chocolates. While she washed her hands, Dina closed the bathroom door and began to whisper conspiratorially. Nanny's already here. He's sitting in the kitchen. Just act casual. You're my sister. I just invited you to visit because we haven't seen each other in a while. Lucy shook her head, rolled her eyes and sighed heavily. I wish I'd stayed home. Perched on the edge of the tub, she looked at her sister unhappily. Don't worry. Everything will be fine. Leshka is a good guy. I wouldn't introduce you to anyone else. Let's go to the table. I'm already hungry. All the more reason. What did you come up with again? I asked you indifferently. I didn't tell you on the phone. Fazina's daughter came to visit us last weekend. I've had doubts about paternity for a long time. I did a DNA test. Anna is not Harry's daughter. Selena's gagging. What? Lucy's eyes widened. It's that Harry's a sucker. And if it wasn't for me, he'd still be raising someone else's child and wearing branch horns. Are you kidding me? Nervously shrugging her shoulders, just in case, Lucy interjected. I'm not in the mood for jokes. Harry's been walking around like a chain dog these days. He looks at me like it's my fault that Anna isn't his daughter. She sighed, shaking her head. My only fault is that I did the analysis without letting Harry know. But God knows. Dina rolled her eyes. I didn't expect this result myself. Until the last minute, I was sure I'd wasted my money. But when I opened the envelope and saw the number 0, I thought I was going to faint. Looking at Lucy and sniffing her nose, Dina lowered her eyes. She began to rub the clean towel she had brought especially for her. Why are you looking at me like that? Tell me I'm wrong. I'm about to have my husband's baby. I'll be on maternity leave for a long time. I looked at the pale face with a pleading look in my eyes, trying to get support. But Lucy was silent, shook her head, and seemed to be in a real stupor. What does Harry say? She said, still impressed. He doesn't say anything. He called Selena in front of me yesterday. Asked her head-on about Annie's birth father. He heard her use foul language, told her about the DNA test. She covered her mouth for a while, then dropped the call. Locked the phone, texting her that he was a fool and a jackass and in big letters a jerk. Taking a deep breath, Dina hung up her towel, opened the door. Let's go, they're waiting for us, she exhaled. Let's go, wheezed Lucy, slowly rising from her uncomfortable seat and after a couple of minutes sitting down on Harry's chair. "Lucy." She shrank back immediately and even seemed to be hunched over, trying to shield herself from the prying eyes in her makeshift house. Why did she agree to it? Now she was sitting there as if she were in the wrong place, unable to raise her eyes and look at Nanny out of shame. But nothing, she'll sit for an hour, and then she'll go home saying that she was busy. Then she'll tell Dina that she didn't like Nanny at all and that she shouldn't bother about it at all. "Lucy, meet." Nanny wrinkled his face, wanted to continue, but failed. Lucy's phone went off with a loud ringtone. "Excuse me, it's the ex-husband." Lucy left the table. "Hello, Archie. What's wrong?" She was not happy. "What happened was that Tony and I came to see you at work, and the security guard said you left on time." Even from a distance, Lucy could sense Archie's nervousness. "I don't have to answer to you. It's my personal life. Go home, I'll come a little later. I'm busy now." I tried to say it calmly and ignore his antics. "Is that okay? I don't need him to control her. He's got a lot of nerve." "You've got someone." Archie didn't pay attention to what she said. "What if I did? Then what?" I said, "Don't look for me, go home. Bye." I went into the kitchen before I could hang up. She shifted her frown to her sister, met her eyes with Nani, who was studying her mood. "I've made my point. I'm interested to hear what Lucy thinks about it," Nanny asked. Dinah smiled warmly and covered her ice-cold hand with her own, as if trying to cheer her up and at the same time to get support. "I agree with Nani." She paused for a moment to organize her thoughts and continued. "Everyone knows that I hate Selena. To put it mildly, I can't stand to see her. I also purely humanly feel sorry for Anna, but you can't feel sorry for all the children." Nanny was right to say that the girl has her own father. Dina did the right thing. I'd do the same thing if I were her. I understand everything. It's hard for Harry now, but to pay alimony to someone else's child all his life, while infringing on his own. Just remembering how Selena was diligently destroying their family brought unsolicited tears to my eyes. Maybe the kids weren't from Archie either, but she managed to get on everyone's nerves enough with her behavior. If they hadn't moved, they probably would have had to seek professional counseling. Someone like Selena will not be lost. She'll be quick to change and find someone to support her child. "Thanks, sis. Maybe my husband will heed your words. I'm only biased against Selena because of Lucy, by the way. If I didn't know what she was capable of, it wouldn't have occurred to me to question her integrity." Harry ran his thumb gently over her chin and teased, pouting his lips. "You did everything right, but from now on, please don't do anything behind my back or without my consent." Looked at her sternly. "I promise." Dina whispered resentfully. "I honestly didn't expect such a result. I don't know what possessed me to take your mugs and bring them to the lab. It was just an irresistible compulsion that came over me at that moment and didn't let go until I did it." When the doorbell rang, there were only mugs of green tea on the kitchen table, and Dina was cutting the chocolate cake Nanny had brought. "Who the hell is that?" Harry grumbled, getting up. "Hello, Harry. We drove by your house and Tony asked me to stop by his favorite Aunt Dina's house. As we approached, we saw our mom's car parked." When she heard Archie's voice, Lucy imagined what their conversation at the round table would look like from the outside. She took a nonchalant look, reassuring herself that he'd understand, but he wouldn't dare make a scene. "Hello, everybody." Tony came right up to Lucy. Dina stretched out her arms to him. Tony instantly moved to her. Let his aunt hug him, kiss him. He began to tell her how he and Daddy had cooked dinner together tonight. "Want some cake?" Harry put 2 plates on the table, took out clean mugs, pulled Archie to a chair. Archie held out his hand to Nani. "Are we interrupting anything?" he asked, looking at him point blank. After he said that, the kitchen was almost dead silent. Only the distant noise of the upstairs neighbors stomping on the ceiling could be heard. Lucy opened her mouth to speak, but Nanny beat her to it. "If you want to hear my personal opinion, I'll answer honestly and only for myself. I was personally interrupted." Lucy froze with her mouth open, unable to believe what Nanny had said. Dina stopped smiling, sat Tony down beside her, put the cake in front of him, put a spoon in his hand, and to lighten the mood, choked a few times. Tony, not paying attention to the adults, patted his aunt's neck. "Wow, I wasn't even surprised." Archie grinned and looked at Dina. "You've got a nerve. You're a matchmaker. I see you've already found a fiancé for Lucy. Aren't you ashamed of scheming behind my back?" Under Archie's hard stare, Dina blushed deeply. Lucy came to the rescue. "Don't I get it? If you've come to ruin everyone's mood, you can turn around and drive back right away. Be nice. If you've come to your former relatives uninvited, then show them some respect." Archie was silent for a few seconds, then shook his head approvingly and forced a smile on his face. "You're probably right. Dina's sorry." Apology accepted. Dinah stood up, plugged the kettle in. She sighed, and as soon as it boiled, she poured water into the pot. Archie didn't know why he turned halfway around and went to Dina's house. He was magnetically drawn to a place where no one really invited him. Some strange premonition kept him awake, and when he saw Vassie's friend beside his wife, his heart was instantly shattered. You have to be a complete idiot not to realize anything. He realized perfectly well that he was the third extra and had no right to be offended, much less jealous. Archie clenched his fists to white knuckles, but so that no one would notice anything, he greeted everyone cheerfully and extended his hand to his rival. And when he heard his answer, he almost snapped again, and only Lucy's words brought him back to reality and kept him from making an indiscreet move. "We actually dropped by with Tony for a minute. Son, let's go home. Aunt Dinah will put the cake with you," he said in a slurred voice, taking a step toward the exit. No one but Harry stopped him. "Archie, where are you going?" "Stay. We were just talking. It's a touchy subject. Dina did a DNA test on the sly, and it turns out Anna's not my daughter. Now I'm racking my brains and I don't know what to do about the test." Archie looked at Lucy. In her eyes, he read about the same resentment when she pinned him against the wall and had to confess about cheating with Vila. Then Katie. Even though nothing had happened between them, but if he were his wife, he'd probably hold a grudge too. Only an asshole like him would ruin everything with his own hands and then look for someone to blame. "I sympathize with you, Harry," swallowed loudly. "Dina did the right thing. She loves you. Take care of her." Every word was hard to say. "Tony, are you with me?" Despite Harry's entreaties, he took a couple more steps. "Look back." Tony rushed his aunt, watching carefully as she placed the cake in a disposable container. Lucy stroked her son's head, answering his question, saying she'd be home soon. If she could only guess how hard and painful it was for Archie right now. Realizing perfectly well that it is impossible to interfere in Yolka's life, he could not help himself. He still considered her his wife and could not accept the opposite. He hoped that by moving in with the help of his son. But when he saw Nani around, he realized he'd given up hope. Archie closed the door. Tony pressed the elevator button. In complete silence, they went downstairs. My heart was jumping out of my chest. If it hadn't been for his son, he'd have wandered into some bar, gotten drunk with grief, and then it would probably be easier to realize that Lucy was now in the company of someone else. Taking just a few steps, he didn't notice how he started the engine in complete silence. Tomorrow, he would simply leave. You can't keep living under the same roof with a woman who has decided to change and rebuild her life. Why don't you go home? Archie saw Nani upset and Tony with him. Harry said excitedly, glancing unkindly at Dina. How many times had he told her to mind her own business, but she had a temper. It's like a broken record. I should introduce Nani to my sister. Every single day, I had to ask Nani to come over. I thought I had an excuse, but now I felt like a complete idiot in front of Archie. I tried to leave Tony, but my favorite nephew wouldn't even listen to me. He ran after his father, Dana said, sighing heavily, her tone resentful. Don't make a big deal out of it. Archie left on his own. No one kicked him out. Everything's gonna be fine. We'll call him in about 40 minutes to ask him how we got there. I don't understand your concern. He and Lucy are divorced. What can you possibly have against her? Nanny couldn't help but put in a word, trying to defuse the situation and looking at those present in surprise. I'm not going after them. Maybe Archie will finally realize that there's a huge gap between us. It's a good thing he saw Nani next to me. There was a fake smile on her face. Dina tried to calm her down and covered her hands with her palm again. Lucy, can I take you out tomorrow? When Nanny heard the invitation, she stared at him with surprised eyes. Where to? She stammered. This was the second time she had seen this man, except for her sister's words about Nanny being a great guy, working in a bank and single. She doesn't know anything else about him. In the evening, the International Gastro Festival Coast of Taste will be held on Victory Square. More than 30 regional cabs and restaurants will take part. For guests, we'll prepare master classes of cooking with tasting. Harry and I are coming, Dinah said quietly, looking alternately at Lucy and Nanny's interested face. Lucy, I'm inviting you. I think we won't be bored there. Shall we go? Nanny asked. I don't know. If Mom can take Tony to her, she said thoughtfully. Preparation, organization, and the program of the event were discussed at the meeting. I wanted to suggest to Dina to go with them to the square. If your mom can't take Tony, we'll take him with us. Nanny didn't back down. He's a big boy. He'll be interested. All right, Lucy said with a shrug. That's fine. I'll be waiting for you at work tomorrow at 5. Nanny smiled, winking at the surprised Harry. The big hand was inexorably approaching 5 o'clock. The excitement was growing. Why had she agreed to go to this gastro festival with Nanny? Good thing Mom wasn't busy and had quietly agreed to stay with them for a few days. It's okay to let them hang out with her ex-son-in-law. It'll be good for both of them. Hi. My heart beat twice as fast as Nanny opened the back door of his car and took out a bouquet. Now that's something I shouldn't have done, I thought to myself, but smiled embarrassedly and said it out loud. Thank you, Nanny. There were a lot of people in the square. It seemed as if the whole town had gathered here. The mood was festive. Laughter and children's cries could be heard on all sides. Right next to them, the chef was conducting a master class. The rave reviews blended into one joyful buzz. What kind of cuisine do you want to try? Shouted Nanny. Let's find Dina and Harry first, and then we'll all land somewhere together. She didn't say that they had agreed to meet her sister at the archway. I turned my head in different directions, but I couldn't see them. It was only when Nanny waved to his friend that she finally saw Dina. Archie knows where you are. Instead of hello, she asked in her ear, looking around as if trying to find a familiar silhouette. Lucy shook her head negatively and grinned. He told me this morning that he didn't want to interfere with my personal life. Tomorrow, he would take his personal belongings and return home. Before that, he talked me into trying to get back together for my son's sake. What about you? What about me? I told him to come home. And him? Dina wouldn't stop. And he freaked out and left for work without even having breakfast. That was the whole conversation. The four of them spent an excellent evening, had a delicious dinner, drank a little red wine. Lucy and Nanny had many common interests. Forgetting that they were not alone, they shared memories, laughed, found common topics for conversation. Their friends looked at them and marveled at how harmonious they looked from the outside. Harry, I'm tired. Let's go home, Dinah said, pulling him by the sleeve toward the parked car. As if on cue, everyone followed Dina. As they passed the Asian food tent, the sister stopped abruptly, staring dumbfoundedly at the couple at the far table. When Lucy followed her gaze, she saw Archie talking passionately to Kathy. There was a bottle of cognac, juice, fruit, and a few Asian dishes on the table. That's news. And Kathy swore to me that she and Archie had never seen each other after our wedding, said thoughtfully. Maybe we should come over. Say hello. She turned to Lucy. I don't think we should disturb them. Let them talk. Lucy tried to speak calmly, but it seems that she did not succeed. Her voice treacherously trembled. How can you trust people after that? Only in the morning he confessed his love for her, and in the evening he's having fun in the company of the same Katie. And she was still hesitant, wanting not to go. All day at work, she'd been bemoaning the fact that she'd hurt him undeservedly. After muttering a few profanities under her breath, she grabbed Dina's hand and made her way to the parking lot. Upset? Nanny asked, opening the front door and helping her into the seatbelt. You didn't have to ask, of course. Yulia's face said it all. Unpleasant. She didn't lie. On the one hand, it was good to see. Now there's no doubt that I did the right thing. I regret that I lost time and did not divorce much earlier, when Selena stepped on her heels, trying to prove that my husband does not love me. She was right, and I'd been a fool to doubt it. I sighed heavily and turned away to the window, because I didn't want to talk about my ex-husband anymore. No matter how much Nani tried to get her to talk, Lucy didn't say a word. They stopped in a familiar courtyard. For several minutes they sat in complete silence. Nanny waited patiently for Lucy to realize that they had arrived. Finally, seeing the familiar windows, she tried to thank him for the evening and hurried out of the salon. Don't forget the flowers, reminded Nanny. He opened the door and got out of the car. He didn't notice how he was so close that electric shocks started to run through his body. She calmed down, hoarsely said, although at this moment it would not hurt to get under a cold shower. A drop of cold sweat rolled down his spine. I wasn't worried, I said, perplexed. When I felt the heat from him, I lowered my eyes. He smiled guiltily, blocking the passage. He stopped his gaze on her lips, and for a second, she thought he was going to kiss her. Let him through. Turning away, she whispered, I'll pick you up tomorrow. Don't be late. I'll be there at 5 sharp. We'll go to the square again. We'll try a different cuisine, but we'll go without Dina. Let's not torture her anymore. When I saw the look of amazement on her face, I realized I'd overdone it. We'll take Tony with us. Deal? Tucked a curl behind her ear, he said affectionately. Agree. I'll think about it, but I won't promise anything. Nanny smiled and stepped aside, reluctantly letting her pass. Lucy took a quick step toward her driveway, opening her purse and pulling out the key to the intercom. Lucy, tomorrow at 5, I'll call you. When she heard Nani's voice, she didn't even turn around. She skidded into the entryway, and only when the elevator doors closed could she finally exhale. Archie didn't come home for the night, and the next day he took his things and moved into his apartment. He promised his ex-mother-in-law that he'd take Tony home with him on weekends if possible. But Lucy never saw it coming. When she heard from her mom that Archie was packing, she decided to accept Nani's invitation and go out again. Hello, everyone. Dina looked away from the monitor when she heard a voice that sounded so pleased with her. Kathy was looking at her as if she were about to share something very important. Dina immediately pictured Archie next to her and grinned, realizing how unpredictable this hastily formed alliance was. Hello, Katie, she said quietly, staring at the computer again. The details of how she'd spent the evening and who she'd woken up with didn't interest her at all. The next day, Katie didn't look so happy, and by the end of the week, she was a wreck. Dean, can I ask you a question? I pulled a chair over. What do you care? Dinah knew that Lucy was living alone now. No matter how much Dina urged her not to push Nani away, her sister was adamant that she wasn't ready to get involved again. You know, he called me last Thursday. We had a great time, she sighed heavily, as if deciding whether or not to give away her secret. We spent the night together at his place. It was good. He promised to call me, but he disappeared in an unknown direction. I don't know what to think. What do you want? Archie's recently divorced, probably hoping to reconcile with his wife. I'm sure if Lucy gives him the finger, he'll come running. Is that what you want? Lowering her eyes, Katie shook her head. I do. What do you think if I go to him myself today? I groaned, reaching out to her, looking for friendly support. But there was none. Dinah took her hands off the table and smeared. Have you tried calling? Why humiliate yourself and chase after a man? I tried. No answer. Maybe he's sick? It almost slipped out of my mouth. So he doesn't need you. But I said it out loud. Anything could be. Dean, please tell me the truth. I can see in your eyes that you know. Did he go back to his wife? Dina sighed. KB had been extremely lucky today. She's in a great mood. Friday, 2 days off. Tomorrow night she and Lucy and Nani are going to the opening night of the play. The fact that Harry listened to her and filed the papers with the court made her move even better. Relax. He's not coming back. Lucy won't take him back, so you can sleep easy. When she saw Katie jump up and down in her chair, she grinned wryly. Let her be happy from now. When she starts crying, she'll remind her. Although, seeing her ex-husband's incoming cell phone number, Lucy was a little surprised. After he'd left, Archie hadn't called, hadn't been interested in his son. Lucy was absolutely sure that he had literally gone head over heels into a new John with Kathy. Lucy, hello. Can I pick Tony up from daycare today? I haven't seen him in a while. I miss him. I want to spend the weekend with him. Lucy didn't expect to hear such words. Of course, she realized that Archie missed his son. But, have you thought about it? Can you manage? Tony's his own kid. If he gets hungry, then under the supervision of adults, he can cook his own eggs, warm up the finished dish in the microwave, or at the worst, make a sandwich. When I heard Archie say yes, I stopped worrying. Oh, good. I think when your son sees you, he'll be very happy. Only 5 hours later, Tony called her and asked her to pick him up from his dad's. Archie opened the door and looked at Kathy in surprise. Hi, you don't call and you don't answer my calls, she said resentfully. I was worried. What if you're sick and there's no one to take care of you? A pang of guilt tugged at my ribs. He'd let her take too much, and then he hadn't noticed that Katie was in his bed. He didn't know what she'd imagined, but in the morning, Archie didn't know where to hide his eyes. Thanks for your concern. Stepping aside, he let Katie into the apartment. I took my son away for the weekend. My brain was melting. Katie stood on the doorstep, completely unaware of the hints. She just smiled sweetly and waited to be invited in. "Come in," he said dryly. She kicked off her shoes and strode straight into the living room. She sat down in a chair, before saying hello to a surprised Tony. "Dad, I thought we had pizza," barely audibly said, looking at the guest. "No, son. Aunt Kathy came to visit us," shrugging his shoulders, pulled out a box with a constructor, trying to hint to Kathy that they don't have time for her. "Dad, let's get it together." Tony's excited. "Son, wait. They'll bring the pizza, we'll eat, and then we'll start assembling." The doorbell rang again. Archie went to open it. Kathy put her foot on the door and smiled sweetly. "Are you the auntie that Mom kicked Dad out of the house for?" Rude words swirled on her tongue, and Katie wanted to say them out loud, but decided not to escalate the situation. "Why would you say that?" She raised one eyebrow in surprise and asked a counter question. "Because I remember you. You were at Aunt Dina's wedding, and you were hitting on Daddy. You wanted Aunt Kathy to take offense and leave." "Listen, kid." I looked down the hall. Archie took the pizza box from the delivery guy and disappeared into the kitchen. "Why don't you go home and stay out of Daddy's way? Take your building set and go to your mom's. You have nothing better to do than build a car. Your dad and I will have better things to do. I warned you with my index finger. Just don't be a sissy and don't complain. I'll deny it and Dad will think you're a tattletale. You're a big boy. You must realize that Daddy can't live alone all his life." When she saw that Tony was listening attentively, she smiled sweetly again. "I want to make your daddy happy, and if you help me, I can do it." After the night with Archie, Kathy had been praying daily to get pregnant and deliver a healthy baby boy. Every morning when she woke up, she hoped to feel a little sick, but as luck would have it, she felt alert and had no nausea. And today, going to visit him, I planned to fix the result by all means. There was a bottle of Armenian cognac in my bag, but I didn't dare to take it out in front of Matthew. Daddy loves Mommy. Soon we'll live together, because Mom will forgive him. "And you go away," shouted Tony. Archie came into the room, and when he heard the word go, he sighed heavily, but he didn't scold his son. He looked at Katie's distraught face, slightly embarrassed, and spread his hands. It seemed to Tony that his father genuinely felt sorry for her. He grabbed his cell phone off the table. "Mom, take me away. I don't want to stay at Dad's anymore." Lucy started to say something to him. Tony nodded in agreement. "Good." He dropped the call and looked at Archie, who didn't understand. "I went to get ready. My mom's picking me up in 20 minutes. She'll be passing by your house soon." "Son, why did you call Mom? We've always gotten along, haven't we? Why are you hurting Daddy?" Archie wailed as Tony packed his things. "Stay here, we were going to pack the car, and we were going to the park tomorrow. You were the one who made the program. I changed my mind. I want to go home." He wasn't going to tell him what Aunt Kathy had told him. He wasn't. He didn't want to be called a dickhead. Let Daddy figure out who's his friend and who's his enemy. Aunt Kathy's the enemy to him, and let Daddy decide for himself. "I'll wait outside for Mom." It seemed to Archie that just in the last hour, his son had matured into a sensible teenager. "I'm not letting you go alone," grabbed the keys off the shelf and hurried after Tony. "Son, what happened? Is it Aunt Kathy?" he asked as soon as he slammed the door behind him. Tony pursed his lips and remained silent. "I don't like her very much either. I thought she realized she wasn't welcome and leave. It's not my fault she doesn't get it." Lucy's car pulled up in front of the driveway. Tony, without even saying goodbye to his father, slid into the back seat and turned away. Lucy opened the window. "What happened? Did you have a fight?" She turned to Archie. "Everything was fine. We ordered pizza." He scratched behind his ear. "Katie came to visit, though I didn't invite her." Seeing the displeasure on Julie's face, he hurried to explain, and then shrugged. "I don't know what happened between them. I was not with them for 10 minutes at most. I suspect that she said something, and Tony is silent as a partisan." "Son, what did Aunt Kathy say to you? Did she hurt you?" Lucy turned to Tony. We are your parents. You don't have to hide anything from us. When she saw her son wasn't in the best mood, she tried to cheer him up. Nasty aunt. Tony wrinkled his nose. She told me to go home to my mom. My dad would be better off. Quietly mumbled, still doubting the correctness of his actions. What? Archie wheezed, his eyes wide. Opening the back door, he commanded. Get out. I don't need anyone telling my son what to do. She's gonna fly out of my apartment and never come in again. Skank, I muttered quietly to myself. You should have thought of that before. Deal with your girlfriends yourself, but leave your son out of it. Tony's going home. You've had enough of this. Close the door, we're going home. I said it in a way that scared me. No, stay with me. We're going to send Aunt Kathy home with you, and then we're going to do our own thing. He shook his head as if the fog had fallen from his eyes, and he began to reel away from the ridiculous nonsense. He realized that he was guilty in front of his son. He should have been tough and sent Katie away at once. So now he was grasping at the slightest opportunity to make things right and make peace with Tony. Tony reluctantly got out of the car. Are you really gonna send her home now? Really, son? Stroked his head and turned to Lucy. I hope we don't bother you again. Don't worry, I'm not gonna hurt my son. Just so you don't regret it later. Sarcastic. Son, call me if you need anything. I sighed heavily and waved goodbye to Tony and drove home. I won't regret it. Seeing the car off, Archie sighed. Left alone in the apartment, Katie went into the kitchen. She opened the refrigerator, figuring out what else to put on the table besides pizza. She climbed into the freezer to see what she'd use for dinner tomorrow. When she heard the door lock rattle, she hurried into the hallway. When she saw Tony again, she was confused, but didn't show it. She smiled sweetly. He's so stubborn, I thought to myself, but that's all right, we'll get him back on his feet in time. Katie, it's time for you to go home, he said over his shoulder. I didn't want to be rude in front of my son. I couldn't help it. There were words on his tongue that made his own ears curl, let alone anyone else's. I thought we'd all sit together. I couldn't find the right words. I squinted one eye and looked at Tony, knowing full well that he was involved. What a little asshole. He's still got a mouth on him. No, that's out of the question. Go home. He repeated the hurtful words. With her lips pressed together, Katie grabbed her bag. She turned around, shouted on the fly, and walked out, leaving the two of them alone. And on the street she let her tears flow, cursing her father's little boy. It was only 2 years later that Lucy was able to organize her personal life. Things never worked out with Nani. A couple of months later, Dina reported that Nanny had started dating a colleague. The girl got pregnant and Nanny had nothing left but to make her an offer. Lucy met her future husband on the train. She was sent on a business trip. Next to her on the bottom shelf was a rather interesting and talkative traveling companion. Billy was on his way to his cousin's wedding. A year later, Lucy had a faithful and loving husband, and 9 months after the wedding, Tony and Billy were picking up her mother and little sister from the maternity hospital. Together with Lucy, they lived in love and harmony until a very old age and retired to help their children raise their beloved grandchildren. Dinah gave Harry a son, and 2 years later a darling daughter. The court granted the claim to waive alimony, but Harry still could not cut Anna out of his life. She often visited him and Dina and never felt like a stranger. Archie, after his divorce from Lucy, married a woman 2 years older than himself. Natalia quickly sorted out and recognized the weaknesses of her husband, kept him in a tight grip. 3 years later they separated. Archie married again, then separated again. His third wife gave birth to his son, but after the divorce took the child to another city. Archie was left alone again in his parents' apartment, enjoying rare meetings with Tony. Kathy tried several more times to resume relations with Archie. Then she met a young man, got married, but was never able to know the joys of motherhood. 5 years later, her husband left to a pregnant mistress. Selena's mother became very ill. For several years, she had to take care of her. Gradually, from a beautiful and blossoming woman, she turned into a tired and exhausted woman. She found her father, and as he did not stubborn, but through the court forced to pay alimony. She never married again. A lot of energy and time was spent on caring for her seriously ill mother. She often thought of Harry and regretted that she hadn't seen in him what Dina had seen in her.
Sandra admired her reflection in the mirror, a tall, slender woman with luxurious hair. She hardly recognized herself. The black dress of classic style shone with a steely sheen, which only emphasized the dignity of her figure even more. Suddenly, a suspicious rustle was heard from behind, and then a whisper from Lily's eldest daughter. "Mommy is so beautiful, like a cartoon queen." Younger Lizzie said affirmatively. "Wow." The girls thought their mother couldn't see them, but the mirror revealed their hidden agenda. And peeking is not good. Sandra turned around abruptly and the daughters squealed with delight. "Mommy, we were trying to be quiet. We just really want to see it too." It's all Lizzie's fault. She's sniffing her nose so loud you can hear her 3 kilometers away. Sandra scooped up the girls and kissed each of them on the top of their sun-scented heads. "Lizzie's sniffling has nothing to do with it, because the mirror gave you away." The older girl walked over to the dresser and immediately clapped her hands together. "Oh, you can see everything, and we thought you wouldn't notice us." Suddenly, the little girl's voice faded. "Daddy's coming." After the sisters secretly entered the parents' bedroom, the door remained ajar. Therefore, no one noticed the appearance of the head of the family. Cameron tried to give his voice a cheerful note, but his face expressed dissatisfaction. "Who's distracting our mother? Go back to your room, you kittens." The girls looked at each other and ran out of the bedroom. Cameron didn't even throw them a funny joke, which sometimes happened when he was in a good mood. "Hello." Today the man had been depressed since morning, so even his daughters were irritating him. Sandra too was all tense, waiting for the verdict. In addition, Cameron took a few steps away and looked at his wife for a minute. It was so unbearable that the woman asked in a half-whisper, "Well, what do you say?" "Nothing good. Couldn't you have bought something more decent with the money I gave you?" "Cameron, the only thing I could have bought with that money was a warm robe. My parents gave it to me. I wonder why I'm finding out about this last one. I told you to keep me in the loop on everything, including financial matters. But it was my parents who decided to help me out. It doesn't matter. You don't live on an island. There, you could do whatever you wanted. But you have a family, which means you have responsibilities and duties." The uplifted mood immediately evaporated. Sandra cast a fleeting glance in the mirror and saw there a droopy woman with dull eyes. Cameron noticed the movement. Look at yourself. Don't look away. Now do you see why I'm always the only one attending important events? Even that shabby outfit you spent mad money on, look all. I won't say the number out loud, years old." Tears of resentment appeared in the woman's eyes. "Cameron, why are you making this spectacle here now? Go to your own corporate party if you're embarrassed of me. It's not like I asked to keep you company." The man jumped up to his wife, a changed look on his face. "You're still raising your voice? You should be blowing dust off me. I provide for all of you, feed you. This apartment, by the way, I also bought it. I got into terrible debt. And all for what? To make my wife turn her nose up at me." Cameron grabbed Sandra's makeup bag and dumped its contents on the dressing table. "This was all bought with my money too, so you better be quiet." He was about to head for the door, but then came back out again. "I'll give you half an hour to pack. Andrea and his wife will pick us up. And as for your reproach, I'm really ashamed of your appearance. Can't you see you look like a tortured codfish? I'd love to go to the party alone, but the chief has ordered all the staff to come with their soulmates. So my situation is, by your grace, a hopeless one." Pouring out his frustration on the unfortunate woman, Cameron said more calmly, "The dress you've chosen is really unfortunate, but it's too late to change anything. And I find your hair too inappropriate for your age. Why all the frivolous curls? I hope my shirt's not in this condition." "Cameron, you'll see for yourself. I prepared everything as usual." The husband went to tidy up the status quo. Sandra remained standing in front of the mirror. She wanted more than anything to tear off her dress and fall into the pillows, to let her tears flow, but there was some truth in Cameron's reproaches. She was indeed entirely dependent on him. After all, even for the necessary feminine trifles, her husband allocated her monthly funds. And after each trip to the store, she showed him the receipts. And this had been going on for almost 10 years. Line checkers were heard from behind again. The daughters clung to their mother as if to comfort her. And the eldest, Lily, whispered, "Mommy, don't believe Daddy. You are the most beautiful in the whole world, and he's scolding you on purpose because he's afraid." "What is he afraid of? Don't you understand? What if while Daddy's at work, that Severance comes and takes you away with him? That's what happened in the story you read to Lizzie and me the other day." Sandra laughed. But I'm not Sleeping Beauty, and there are no princes or princesses among my acquaintances. And anyway, go to your room now, Daddy will come and he'll swear at us again. This threat was followed by an instant reaction. The girls flew out of the room with cosmic speed. Left alone, Sandra adjusted her makeup. She took another critical look at herself in the mirror. Fuck that hairstyle. It's a mess on my head. In a minute, there was no trace of the curl design. The woman ran a comb through her long hair and then braided the strands into a beautiful herringbone and laid the braid on the side. That really is better. The woman, for the first time in just one day, caught herself thinking that agreeing with her husband in everything had become a tradition for her. She was used to obediently following his orders, used to his perpetual displeasure. It had gotten to the point where she was afraid to move at night to avoid waking Cameron. But the worst was that her husband takes such servile behavior as a norm. And not so long ago, things had been different. How could she not have noticed her transformation into a slave? This was not the first time this question had arisen for Sandra. After all, 10 years in the scale of one human life is a long time. But it so happened that Cameron has imperceptibly become for her not only the main person, but also the ruler of her fate. Unfortunately, she realized it too late. And now she has to bear all the insults and humiliations without complaint. But all this she is willing to endure only because there is hope that one day she will again see that kind Cameron, who for her was from childhood the standard of a real man. Sandra was too young to remember the details of their first meeting, but Millie Rose loved to tell how her 3-year-old daughter had declared in a loud voice when you group brought in the new boy, "This is my friend." To assert this right, the little girl squeezed the baby's palm tightly and led him to the part of the room where there was a play corner. The pupils of the younger group fell silent, and the adult witnesses of this touching scene smiled. But no one objected to this division of roles. Then Sandra was not characterized by a soft character, and any aggression on the part of her peers responded sharply. And her methods of fighting with opponents allowed the use of brute physical force. Therefore, Millie Rose often had to blush because of the unworthy behavior of a small bandit. Charles Rose, about the pranks of his Harris, proudly stated, "We got a streak. We have such a family name, so in the family we have no Slovakov." Millie Rose always said to such praise, "Next time you'll go after your daughter. I'm not the only one who has to take the blame for her bad upbringing." The man was genuinely indignant. "Who dares to say such a thing is a fool? That's what you'll tell the teacher personally, because she thinks that you and I are failing in our parenting duties." Charles Rose rushed to stand up for justice, but his optimism didn't last long. Literally a week later, righteous fervor faded and loving father found any excuse not to cross the threshold of the kindergarten. However, since the advent of Under the Chief in the face of Fatty Cameron, Sandra a little changed for the better. The same teacher, who not so long ago criticized the girl's behavior, now at every turn praised her. "Sandra is an angel. Cameron is clumsy and not everything the kid does well. And she tries to help him in everything, and such tutelage, gives its fruits." The boy tries to imitate his girlfriend. Sandra, and in his school years, was for Cameron either a beacon or a guiding star. If he did something on his own, he always looked back at Sandra. The boy needed her support like air. But Cameron himself also tried to respond in the same coin. Back in the 3rd grade, the guy showed his wrestling character when he was not afraid of the guys who were 2 years older. 5th graders decided to shake their fellow younger age, and as a victim they chose girls. Cameron stumbled upon the humiliating scene by accident. 3 girls from the class, surrounded by immature racketeers, were desperately crying, "Boys, we really don't have any money. We spend it all in the cafeteria." One bigger boy spat through his teeth, "What if we shook it like a branch?" The girls cried even louder, but those tears made the extortionists even more angry. One of them grabbed the smallest girl by the hood of her jacket. Cameron, without thinking of the consequences, grabbed some stick and together with it went to ram the enemy with a shout, "You assholes, let the girls go." The hooligans obviously did not expect such a turn of events and rushed away. The rescued classmates later told everyone about Cameron's courage, and the young hero was embarrassed by the unexpectedly fell on him popularity. But his moment of fame was short-lived. When the novice bandits realized that screwed up in front of the 3rd grader, they decided to that cruel revenge. And the next day, after the landmark rescue of girls under the eye of yesterday's hero was a huge black eye. The rescued girls sighed and rolled their eyes prettily. "Cameron, we got you in trouble. Now you can cheat off my math homework for the whole quarter." A second classmate wanted to get him into a ballroom dance class, but Cameron delicately declined all help and proudly said, "Bruises are nothing. Scars adorn the face of a real man." But the popularity of Cameron did not like Sandra. When his classmates started circling him like flies, she seriously warned them, "Stone is my friend. We've been friends since kindergarten, and just because Cameron protected you doesn't mean he's going to hang out with you." The classmates didn't need to be told twice and quickly refocused their attention on another object. But Cameron had already gotten a taste of popularity and was angered by Sandra's interference. "Rose, why are you meddling where you're not asked? Maybe I don't want to be friends with you anymore." This statement annoyed, but did not scare Sandra. The girl stopped paying attention to Cameron and he had no access to her notebooks. Of course, he could move to another desk and many girls would be happy to have such a neighborhood, but something told him that he should not make public the spoiled relationship with Sandra. The tense situation resolved itself. All the holidays at school were celebrated brightly, but with the involvement of their own talents. When the program of the event for Defender of the Fatherland Day was drawn up, all that was left was to find worthy presenters. At the Pedagogical Council discussed different candidates, but the principal herself unexpectedly suggested, "What are we puzzling over here?" In the third A, there is a beautiful couple, Sandra and Cameron. One of the teachers objected. "They're very young." And that's great. Kids are always viewed positively, even if they make mistakes. This common cause brought the friends together again. They did an excellent job, and many said that it was the presenters who were the highlight of the concert program. Sandra was in the crossfire of glances for the first time, and Cameron already knew the taste of fame. Then after the concert, he suddenly realized that Sandra could be the bridge from which he could jump more than once. This discovery both shocked and pleased the ambitious boy. He held out his hand to his girlfriend Sandra. "I'm sorry, I was wrong. I said some nonsense to you." The girl was embarrassed. She did not expect such words. It was out of his character. "Oh, come on now, Cameron. I'm not mad." She smiled openly and immediately realized how much she missed their interactions. "Friendship forever then?" Sandra laughed with joy overflowing her soul and Cameron chimed in. "Friendship is strong. It won't break." Her friend picked up on it in a thin voice. "It won't break through the rains and blizzards." They selflessly sang the popular children's song, holding hands and looking into each other's eyes. And at that moment, they sincerely believed that no one and nothing could break their friendship. About how the world seems very different when you're young. This is a well-known fact. Sandra and Cameron were convinced that they should only step on the broad road to adulthood, and they will walk on it easily and confidently. Although both on the excellent certificate did not pull, but the chances of entering a good university were high. At that time in the country, there was a demand for lawyers, economists, and a couple decided to apply directly to the Capital University. Sandra had some last-minute doubts. "Cameron, aren't you and I a little overconfident? After all, this is not something, but a very serious educational institution. Courage conquers cities. Remember that proverb?" The girl realized that Cameron was encouraging them. Somewhere in the back of her mind, she agreed with him, but the doubts were growing. "I remember, but something doesn't make me feel at ease." "What's with the sluggish mood?" "Sandra, I don't recognize you. You were always brave, weren't you?" "That was before, at my home school. It's all the same. This is Chicago. Why don't you and I find something a little more modest? There are plenty of good schools all over the country." Cameron got serious. "I'll try to prove to you the evil truth of life on my fingers. Indeed, there are many institutes in our beautiful country, but only the capital's universities have an impeccable reputation. Even if your diploma is full of C's with a rare speck of Thursday, the mere fact of graduating from an institute in Chicago will be a huge advantage when applying for your first job. I probably don't need to tell you that career advancement is directly related to where you start." Sandra looked at the guy as if she was seeing him for the first time. They had interacted so much, knew so much about each other. Sandra understood that Cameron wanted to accomplish something, but for him to have such emphatic, pragmatic thoughts, she hadn't realized. He even seemed distant, unfamiliar to her now. Cameron, you have such a strange way of thinking. I even get the impression you're repeating someone else's words. I don't deny it. There's a point, but I don't see anything wrong with it. Look, you and we both come from average families. Our parents are positive people, real hard workers. What's wrong with that? My father has a wall full of certificates of honor. What do we do with these props? What do we do with them? What use is it? Cameron, you're not making any sense right now. You think that because you've been raised with outdated stereotypes. But life changes, and today we have different priorities because enthusiasm alone will not get us far. My father realized this a long time ago, but he didn't have time to readjust. It was him who laid out the rules of life for me. From the beginning, as the great poet said, one should aim oneself at achieving the main goal from a young age. Of course, at first it may seem unattainable, but if you set the right accents, everything will work out. You surprise me, and I've never looked that far. It always seemed to me that it is necessary, as in a computer game, to pass from one level to another. In principle, you are correct in your reasoning, but the main goal should be set right away, using your comparison as a target. Cameron looked at her with eyes that Sandra realized her arguments will not be heard, but still tried. Wait, Cameron, what if we don't get in? I'll definitely get in. I'm sure of it. If I can't get in on a budget, I'll go to a tuition-free program. That's a lot of money. My parents don't have that kind of money. She didn't understand how Cameron could say that. It was like she was a stranger and an outsider to him. No way. She must have imagined it or misunderstood. Turns out she got it right. I can't help you there. As they say, to each his own. By the time he left school, Cameron's selfishness was evident in the smallest things. One day, Rose was careful to point this out to her daughter. Sandra, I don't like to meddle in other people's affairs, but I don't like the fact that Cameron is taking advantage of you. Don't you see that? Mom, you're imagining it. We're on good terms. He helps me with a lot of things too. I don't see it. I don't see it. God be with you. They left town together. As is customary in such cases, parents gave a farewell. And the fledglings believed that at the first time they would conquer not only the capital, but the whole world. But Sandra immediately flew. She did not have enough points to get on the budget. And Cameron was jubilant because he passed the competition. Sandra cried all day from resentment, but she didn't want to go back to her town. One girl with whom they lived together in the dormitory advised, "Many people after the first run find themselves in the gap. It's normal. Now the main thing is not to miss a year. You can find out where you did not get enough to learn some other useful profession." This option interested Sandra, and she went together with her neighbor to look for an educational institution. For a whole day, they passed more than a dozen colleges and colleges, but everything was already packed to the brim, and only one college of food industry had a few free places. But the girls, tired from their search, were satisfied with the result. Sandra thought that Cameron would be happy when he found out that she would be studying in the capital after all. The girl decided to tell him this happy news over the phone, but her friend's answer knocked her down. "You realize that college is a judgment. Now everyone will look at you as inferior. It would be better if you went home, and next year you could try again." Sandra tried to change her friend's mind, but he firmly believed in his rightness. The girl called him several times, hoping to meet him, but Cameron each time found 100 excuses so that the date did not take place. May, the girl they went to college with, remarked, "Looks like your date is embarrassed of you." "He's my friend. We didn't do anything like that." "And too bad. Whatever they say, guys like consistency. Yeah, they can have an affair with your girlfriend on the side, but God forbid they get what they used to think was theirs stolen from under their noses." "Are you implying something?" "I'm not implying anything. I'm telling you straight up. Make your Cameron worry. You're an attractive girl. You can have a boyfriend. May, do you think that's gonna work? May, I'm sure your friend will come running. How do I put this plan into action?" It's very simple. May's method was simple, but most importantly, it didn't require anything. The executor was quickly found too. Sandra was being courted by a guy who was nearing the end of his studies. Scott was a fan of cooking and dreamed of having his own restaurant. He was jokingly called the cook's book in college, because he knew thousands of recipes and fascinatingly told about the national features of cuisines of different countries of the world. Scott invited Sandra to a cafe a couple of times, and she from boredom agreed to keep him company on the advice of her neighbor. The girl began to give the guy signs of attention, and soon he already followed her like a needle. On the first holiday of spring, Sandra came to visit her parents with Scott. The young man immediately took a liking to his parents. Rose was impressed by his knowledge of cooking. The mother enthusiastically whispered to her daughter, so as not to hear the guest, "Sandra, this guy is a real treasure. He's a treasure. Don't let him get away, so you don't have to bite your elbows later. Mom, Scott's just a good friend of mine. What is it with you people and making plans for the future?" It's okay, because all parents worry about their kids and wish them well. You already had a best friend, but he hasn't been around lately. He's probably embarrassed to be friends with a girl who's studying to be a chef, because today bankers rule the roost. Rose talked about Cameron, mentioning his name, which showed her strong resentment towards her daughter's former classmate. Sandra was amazed at how good a judge of character her mother was, but in remembrance of an old friendship, she still stood up for the one she was always thinking about. "Mom, you say yourself that you can't just judge a person. Cameron has a goal and he's on his way to it. Freshman year at any school is the most difficult period. I'll admit that even I have problems, even though I'm in college. But in the summer, if everything works out well, I'll go back to university. And this is the right decision. Here I support you in everything." The holidays flew by like 1 minute and the guests had to return to the capital, but May's plan worked 100%. Literally the next evening after returning to the capital, there was a knock at the room where Sandra and her friend lived. When the girl opened the door, she was stunned by surprise. In front of her with a confused smile stood Cameron. "Hello." The guy pulled out a huge bouquet of flowers from some unknown secret place. "I'm sorry I'm late, but I want to wish you a happy spring festival. I couldn't get here sooner. You probably weren't expecting me." "You were right. I haven't been expecting you for a long time." Yeah, what's an old friend for when there's so many suitors around?" "Yeah, I heard you got a boyfriend. Is it serious?" Sandra's soul was ringing with joy. She had no idea that May's plans would bear fruit so quickly. "Since when did you become interested in my life?" "Sandra, can I come in? It's a bit awkward talking in the doorway." "Sandra." "Yes, of course, I'm sorry, but your visit is so unexpected that I was confused. And about the old friendship. It was you who stopped answering my calls, and since I don't have a monastic vow, I have every right to go on a date." "Cameron, but you're the one who told me to go for it." "That's right, but I think your only goal right now is our family. I want my house to be warm and cozy, to have children's laughter in it. And what will we live on? Let now our parents help us a lot, but they will not be forever pulling from the last strength. I'm not going to put such a burden on their shoulders. I only have 2 years of schooling left, and then I promise that I will do everything I can to provide for my family." Sandra listened to her husband's optimistic plans and suddenly asked, "Cameron, tell me honestly, why did you marry me?" This conversation took place during breakfast and the man almost choked on a sandwich with sausage and cheese. "Sandra, you can't ask stupid questions while you're eating." "Sandra, it's a bad habit most women have. But I'll tell you this, I didn't even consider another candidate for a wife. You and I know each other well, which is good for our marriage. Besides, you're a great hostess and a great cook. In a word, I have complete confidence in you." "Cameron, what about love? Did you marry me for pragmatic reasons?" Sandra was stunned by her husband's revelation. She had expected to hear from him completely different words, but he did not see fit to say them, even for the sake of propriety. The young woman felt humiliated. She wanted to say something to her husband, but Cameron caught her mood and beat her to it. "Love is a beautiful word, of course, and I understand what a storm is raging in your sensitive heart, but life is a harsh thing. You can't go far on love alone. For me, it's more important the material side in everyday life. And lyrics, that's a secondary matter. So you didn't marry me for love, but out of convenience?" Cameron looked at his wife the way one looks at a hopelessly ill person. "Yes, what's wrong with that? I'm comfortable with you, and I plan to live my life that way. And thanks for the delicious breakfast." Her husband never answered the main question, but Sandra didn't dare to ask it anymore, because she knew the answer. That day, she realized how right her mother had been. Everything inside her protested, and the voice of reason shouted, "Leave him now, or it will be too late. Where is your prize, Sandra?" The young woman did not heed this call and stayed. It was her first sacrifice, made on the altar of, as she thought, marital happiness. Cameron was a subtle psychologist and immediately realized that he had won the first victory. Every day thereafter, he methodically suppressed his wife's own self. His dictate was well thought out and from the outside resembled the care of a beloved woman. Another advantageous quality possessed Cameron. He always acted proactively, not giving his wife a chance to recollect. Just a year of living together, Sandra turned into an obedient servant of her husband. She fulfilled his every whim at the first request. When Cameron learned that they would have a child, he began to control her every move. Therefore, Sandra had to leave the university after 2 years of study. Subsequently, she left in work, which gave her at least a small opportunity to realize herself. The only consolation for the young woman became children. A year and a half after the birth of Lily, Sandra became pregnant again. This period was the happiest in her life because Cameron weakened control and she could afford small weaknesses. Her husband simply adored his daughters and made plans for the future. "We're not gonna stop there. You still have to give me a son." Sandra tried to joke. "Cameron, come down to earth. We are already cramped in this rented apartment, and you are already planning a third child. Don't worry, wife. Very soon our living conditions will improve." Sandra knew that her husband was not used to throwing words into the wind and waited patiently. She did not pester him with questions because for several years of life together learned that unnecessary curiosity only makes her husband angry, and she did not want to burst into scandal. One day, husband came from work in an elevated mood. He picked up his eldest daughter who ran up to him. "Yes, of course it's my own fault, but you realize that the life of a student." The girl interrupted the guest. "Cameron, I understand everything. It's hard for you. You sleep 3 to 4 hours, you have a goal, but you forgot one little thing. I'm a student too. Yes, the profession I'm learning is not so prestigious, but if there are no cooks, bankers and other professions will have a hard time." The young man looked at Sandra as if he was seeing her for the first time. The girl noticed how he blushed to the roots of his hair, so she realized that her suspicion was not groundless and Cameron was really shy of her society. But the fear of losing such a convenient and fail-safe defense still overpowered ambition. But soon there was another reason that forced Cameron to protect his friend from outside influence. The guy was pleasantly surprised to learn that in a few months Sandra learned to cook. One day the girl, along with her friend, asked to visit Cameron. He agreed but warned, "You just do not fall, but we have everything Spartan." May couldn't help herself as she stepped into the room. "This isn't a room to live in, it's a den, so outsiders are asked to leave, and Sandra and I will try to make everything look more or less decent." Not even 2 hours later, the tenants looked around apprehensively, not believing that they were in their room, but even more surprised when the temporary hostesses invited them to the table, in the center of which a large pot shone with pristine brilliance. The reaction of the ravenous students pleased May immensely. It seemed to her that another minute of delay and the guys would go into shock from the increased saliva. "From what was in your refrigerator, we could only boil borscht. So, dear hosts, don't apologize for the modest table." But 4 sturdy guys were not up to etiquette, and they greedily pounced on the food. But their appetite didn't stop them from praising the girls from time to time. "Tasty, yummy, it's like home. It's been a long time since I've had such a hearty lunch. Today, we have a real belly feast." The girls were happy with the result of the action, and the guys invited them to visit. "Girls, your borscht is like the elixir of life. Come again, next time we will buy more food. Maybe you can make us some cutlets." May winked at her friend. It's true what they say that the shortest way to a man's heart is through his stomach. Today, I was convinced of that. Sandra was absorbed in her own thoughts and didn't answer. May tugged her friend's arm. "Sandra, wake up. Listen, what do you think of Fred?" "Fred who?" "The skinny, tall one. And the one with the glasses?" "He's okay, he's cute." "I thought he was nice too." "Him." Her friend's romance with the future banker spun so fast that in the summer the couple got married. The newlyweds rented an apartment and Sandra was left alone in the dormitory. But this loneliness was not long. In the fall, she entered the university on a correspondence course. Cameron also agreed that to combine study and work is the best option for a couple who are going to become a family in the near future. Only in this happy picture there was no place for Scott. The guy from afar saw a shining Sandra in the company of a childhood friend and understood everything without words. No, he didn't hold a grudge against the girl he really liked very much. But realizing that his chances were practically 0-0, he silently retreated. Then he could not suspect that many years would pass and he would play a major role in Sandra's fate. Rose was unpleasantly surprised by her daughter's decision to marry her childhood friend. But most of all, the woman was worried about Scott, who liked him very much. Sandra, have you thought this through? Cameron is a selfish man. You're gonna have a lot of grief with him. Mom, you're acting weird. Instead of wishing us happiness, you're making terrible predictions. Henry didn't interfere, but it wasn't hard to tell from his look that he wasn't thrilled about the wedding either. He decided to talk to Sandra just before the ceremony. Daughter, I just want to say one thing. Do not confuse childhood friendship with love. Are you sure Cameron feels that way about you? Of course, Dad, or he wouldn't have proposed to me. But as the emotions subsided after the wedding, Sandra began to ask herself that question more and more often. All the burdens of family life she had to pull on herself. Even more complicated life was the study. Cameron advised his young wife to drop out of university. Sandra, why bother with your brain? Sandra, why bother with your brain? You have a good profession, by the way, very useful for the family. I love your borscht and everything you make. When they arrived at the restaurant, where the event was held on the occasion of the bank's anniversary, the party was already in full swing. After a brief introduction of the guests, the chief took Cameron aside. Your wife is a real beauty. Women are the jewelry of our lives, so they need to be treated with care. Sandra felt awkward around strangers, but she was not alone for long. Suddenly, a familiar voice sounded nearby. What a surprise. How nice to see you here, Sandra. The woman hardly recognized Freddie, the lanky young man who had won the heart of her dorm mate. I didn't expect to see you here either. Cameron didn't tell me you two were working together. You're not gonna believe this, but I'm just a guest at this party. I work for a company that works closely with the bank. You don't even know, Sandra, that your husband was the lucky ticket. Everyone else in our company is more modest, although none of us have any reason to complain about life. Wait, Valerie, why are you alone? Why are you alone? Where's May? My wife is like the Flying Dutchman. You may have heard of it. May appears like a mirage and then disappears. She's currently in Italy. You may not know that my wife has her own restaurant, but that's not enough. She's got a whole chain. Something under Sandra's heart stabbed painfully. She wanted to ask Freddie something else, but Cameron returned. He nodded nonchalantly to his former classmate. Hi, we'll talk later. 3. Her husband didn't let go of Sandra's hand. Cameron, where are you dragging me? By the way, it hurts. It's okay, you'll get over it. I told you to keep a low profile. I'll find our seats and you'll wait patiently for me. The organizers refused from the traditional long table, and all the guests of the feast were seated at separate tables, in groups of 6 people, so that the participants of the feast did not get lost. Each seat was marked with a flirty nameplate. Cameron quickly found his last name. You see, it says, that's you and me. Sit down and wait. I hope I can go to the bathroom. You were being ironic. You were being ironic. Sit down. I have to talk to someone else. Her husband's behavior made the woman angry, and she could barely contain her emotions. Cameron, why all the trouble? Why did you bring me here? To make fun of me, so I could be alone, like a garden scarecrow. I'm sick of it. The man squeezed his wife's hand and hissed in her face. Imogene, me too. You better be quiet, or I won't be able to take care of myself, and I'll deal with you at home. Sandra had never seen her husband in such a state before, and his last words truly frightened her. All around her, the cheer was buzzing, toasts and congratulations were being made, but Sandra felt like a vacuum-packed, walled-in person. She raised her glass together with everyone else, but barely tasted it and put it back. The woman didn't touch the food at all. But Cameron behaved very actively and almost did not sit still. He was having a blast on the stage. Sandra immediately noticed that a gorgeous blonde in a gorgeous dress of sky blue color did not leave his side. She did not pay attention to it at first, but during another dance she noticed how the strange woman pressed against her husband, and Cameron's hand at that moment was below the waist of her partner. "Well, my princesses, we'll be moving soon. We will have a large apartment in the new neighborhood." Sandra was wary. "Cameron, but where did we get that kind of money? Have you forgotten where your husband works?" "That's right, at the bank. I already took out a soft loan. Then we have not used the maternity capital. And I even forgot about it. We could use the extra money now. By the way, I've already paid the installment and all the necessary documents. I think you don't mind that I took care of this issue." "Sure, Cameron. I don't know anything about the law, and you're doing this for our family." "Exactly, and I'm glad you realize that. I hope you'll feed me tonight for the good news." "I'm all set. I've got the first course and the second course. If you knew how much I appreciate moments like this." "I'm a Cameron too, and I wish there were more of them." But her husband didn't hear her. He went to the bathroom to wash his hands, where his joyful voice came from. "Well, I've got more good news. I've been offered the position of head of security. Of course, I will have to go through some procedures, because it is a very responsible position." Sandra handed her husband a clean towel. "You'll do great. It's a really unusual day today. I even feel like the sun is shining brighter." All happy people feel that way. All happy people feel that way. And I'm very happy to see you happy. Cameron pulled his wife to him and kissed her hard. It was a very different kiss. It wasn't the kind of kiss he bestow on a woman on the run to work. It was a special time for the couple. Moving into a new apartment had brought them together. Everyone in the family was fully engaged in getting their lives together. While Cameron disappeared at work, Sandra was engaged in minor repairs. Help the young family decided to help in parents. Even Lily and Lizzie tried to contribute to the common cause, but it was not always successful with the little girls. When the repair was finished, Rose wanted to talk to her daughter in the field. "Are you happy or are you trying to be?" "Mommy, have I ever lied to you? Why are you asking me? You look tired. It's been a long time since we've seen each other, and the change is very noticeable. Have I aged so much? You've gotten a little dull or something. And your eyes are confused. You look confused, and you keep averting your eyes as if you're afraid I'll read something in them." Sandra sat down on the table opposite her mother, and her condition was not hard to guess, because she nervously rubbed the fringe of the tablecloth on the table. "Mom, even if I'm not completely happy, but only trying to portray it, still nothing can change. Yes, I often catch myself thinking that I dreamed of a different life. Yes, I constantly feel like a bird in a cage and I'm aching to break free. But you realize I can't afford it. I have kids and they need a father. Cameron loves the girls, they love him." Rose cried softly. Daughter, what a life you've condemned yourself to. And it could have been different. I can't understand where your character has gone. You were so stubborn as a child and as a teenager." Sandra grinned bitterly. "Mom, you know the answers to these questions. It's my own fault for letting myself dissolve into my husband. All that's left of me is a shadow. Everything else I put on the altar of marital happiness. Perhaps I've made a strong comparison, but it's the one that best fits the situation. I don't know what to tell you, but remember, you have family to help you." "Thank you, Mom. But I still have faith that things will work out with Cameron and me." Rose said nothing. She felt in her heart that this way her daughter is trying to hold on to the last hope, which is about to disappear forever, like a star in the morning sky. If the first years of married life Cameron still sometimes heard the voice of conscience after moving into a new apartment, he stopped listening to it. He felt himself the master of life, and on anyone who disagreed with this distribution of roles. There was a lot of pressure on his part. Of course, it was Sandra who was getting the brunt of it, although the woman had recently completely lost the ability to resist. But strangely enough, it was this blind obedience that threw the man off balance, and he had to make a great effort not to spill his irritation on his wife in public during the corporate party. "I'm sorry, but I have to go." Sandra went to the ladies' room to wash her hands, but noticed in a dark corner near the closet a couple hidden from prying eyes. The men and women were seated comfortably in chairs, but she recognized Cameron immediately from his voice. but bear with me a little longer. Now is not the time to change things." In response, a woman whispered hotly, "Cameron, I've been patient for 3 years. Believe me, I can't have that old man around me. I'm sick of hiding, these secret dates and all. Jules, believe me, I want to be with you too. Yes, I've wanted to for a long time, but if your husband found out about our meetings, he'd bury me alive in the ground." The blonde laughed softly. "He has long known everything, but always forgives me a little pranks." "Why?" "Because. Sorry, this is a very sensitive subject. Let's get out of here and go to our nest." "I can't. I'll be right back. My wife's there." "I can't. Wait till tomorrow." Sandra didn't wait for the end of the conversation and went back to the hall unnoticed by the lovers. There was an open terrace in the restaurant where the drunken crowd was having fun. No one paid attention to Sandra and she slipped outside. The light breeze cooled her down a bit and she began to think about her next steps. But all the plans were too bold for her to realize. "Nothing. I'll tell him what I think tonight." The girls were already asleep and Sandra thanked her neighbor, who sometimes kindly agreed to look after the little naughty girls. A large cash bill quickly disappeared into the folds of the elderly lady's clothes. "Sandra, thank you. By God, it cost me nothing to do you a favor. All the more I am pleased to do it, because your little girls are very obedient girls. Most kids today are spoiled, but your little girls are always obedient and polite. And little Lily even calls me grandma. It's so nice." The neighbor was set for a long dialogue, so Sandra had to say goodbye to her. "Yes, your help is invaluable and we will definitely turn to you and my husband if the girls have no one to leave them with." The door of the neighboring apartment slammed shut and the woman breathed a sigh of relief. But no sooner had she gone into the nursery to admire her sleeping daughters than footsteps sounded near the door. Sandra immediately guessed that it was her husband, and the sound of his footsteps did not bode well for her. Finding his wife in the hallway, Cameron gave her an angry look. "Why did you leave? Why did you leave? I was sick of watching this feast of mockery. You could have warned me. You could have warned me. You could have, but you didn't want to." "Yes, I did. How are you talking to me? Cameron, I'm not your subject or your serf. I'm sick of this. I'd had enough of being ruled by you." "Duh, you?" The man didn't take his eyes off his wife, which didn't promise a quiet evening either. "Since when did you become so independent? Why so bold?" "Because I saw you making nice with the chief's wife with mine own eyes." "Ah, you were following me. Okay, you want the truth? You can have it. I have no choice but to see my male needs on the side. Because you're like an Egyptian mummy in bed. You're no good and your borscht and cutlets are getting on my nerves." Offensive words of her husband slapped her face. A thick lump rolled up to her throat and Sandra felt that she was choking. "Cameron, but you're taking it out on me. Are you a brainless sheep to blindly obey my every word?" "But I thought, and I thought, this conversation is over. It's a good thing you found out today. The end of our family drama was inevitable anyway. Go make your borscht somewhere else, although you can stay here as a housewife." Cameron laughed evilly in her face. "Think about that option. I hope I've made myself clear." "Yes, except for one little thing. You forgot about the children." The man wrinkled his nose as if he had a sudden toothache. "You can stay in my apartment for the time being, but I don't have time to babysit my daughters. Even though I love them very much." Cameron disappeared behind the bedroom door, but reappeared a moment later. He tossed a pillow onto the living room couch. "You'll sleep here tonight. This is your punishment for disobedience." That night, Sandra didn't sleep a wink. She scrolled through the chronicles of yesterday, remembered the beginning of their family life, but never realized when the process of destruction was started. She no longer doubted that her softness was to blame. In the morning, Cameron, as if nothing had happened, he got up at the usual time and said in a cheerful voice, "Wife, where is my breakfast?" Sandra, too, rushed into the kitchen out of inertia. It took her only a couple of minutes to prepare an omelet with grated cheese. Her husband loved that dish. To avoid facing her abuser, Sandra closed herself in the bathroom and turned on the shower. Through the sound of the water, she heard the front door slam. On the kitchen table was a piece of paper on which her husband's hand had written a few words. "I'll be late. You don't have to cook dinner." Sandra's eyes went black. Trying not to wake the girls, She began to take out her anger on anything that came to hand. "Thank you, master, for letting me not cook you dinner. It's a good thing you're late, because you're better off with that blonde than your wife. She doesn't stink of borscht like I do," Sandra half whispered, taking out her years of anger on milk cartons, canned peas, apples, and cabbage. She used a knife to shear the food with a kind of ferocity and then sent it into the garbage can. The splatters flew in different directions and soon colored juicy rivulets flowed from the walls. As she let off the steam, the woman was pleased with her work. "That's great. Now I have to do the same for everything that gets in my way. As my mommy likes to say, it's the beginning." Rose understood without words when she saw her daughter and her granddaughters on the doorstep. Sandra's eyes were burning, and her demeanor showed that she was excited. "Meet the guests." "Of course, my precious ones. Come in. Husband, look who's here." Henry kissed his daughter and granddaughters. The girls immediately began to pester their grandfather with questions. "Will we have our own room, Grandpa? Will you buy us toys?" "Of course, you'll have everything. In Grandma and Grandpa's house, you can even walk on your head." The girls squealed with delight and immediately began to carry out Grandpa's instructions. Rose helped with the packing. "Sandra, are you here for good?" "Yes, I thought I'd take your advice and start from scratch. You know how builders have an expression for zero cycle, and in my life, it so happened that yesterday I destroyed an old building, even the foundation was torn apart. Now I have to build it all over again, but I'm not afraid, even though I know it's gonna be hard. It was right to leave him. Cameron will be lost without you. Mom, he found a replacement for me a long time ago. I don't think there's another woman like you in the world. No woman would put up with an asshole like Cameron. But don't worry, you won't be lost with us, and we'll help you find a job. I've got some ideas about that." "That's interesting. Let's see what you got in mind, Monty. Remember Lindsay Stark? Remember our town's first cooperator? She's in desperate need of employees. She's not doing so well. She's got a lot of loans, and her bar is barely making a profit. She thinks it's a loss." The next day, Sandra was already on the staff of a local diner. The diner, which owned Lindsay, was located in the bus station. But the establishment had a bad reputation in the town because they're from early morning to evening crowded fans of foamy drink. The owner was happy to see Sandra. "Oh, thank you, Sandra. Everyone's running away from me. I don't like the conditions. You'd think I'd be satisfied with these skewed faces, come at noon and dawn and beg for a loan to let them go, and then forget." Word's willing woman laid out all the nuances of work in an institution of this type. But Sandra was not frightened by the difficulties. A few weeks she studied the peculiarities of the work, and then said to the hostess, "And why did not you sell baked goods? You could even organize a hot meal here, because at the bus station there is such a flow of passengers." Lindsay looked at the new employee with a condescending glance. "You have a Barbarossa plan. Sure, it looks good from the outside. But what do I get out of the pies and salads? Believe me, a lot more than I make selling beer. Look, I've done some calculations." Sandra handed the landlady a notebook full of figures. She asked in surprise, "Are you familiar with this business?" "Not much. 2 years of college, then the same number of years at the university. I wanted to become an economist, but it didn't work out, but I still managed to get some useful knowledge." That evening, a satisfied Lindsay beckoned Sandra into the back room. "I've been studying your Chekist notes. Why do I say that? Because those numbers look like a cipher, like they do in the spy movies. Of course, I don't understand this science very well, but I trust you. My situation is dire. I need to fix it now. I totally agree. But tell me, where are we going to do all of this? It's going to require additional staff and space." Sandra began to explain her plan. "We'll rent the space. Yes, we'll need extra money, but we can rent the shop by the hour at the restaurant. I already checked, it won't cost much. I know about your difficulties, and I can take the loan on myself, and the staff do not need to hire yet. I'm a college graduate, and I even have experience working in a cafe in the capital." The hostess looked at Sandra as if mesmerized, and then enclosed her in the vise of her embrace. "You are my salvation." The woman was so emotional that she couldn't hold back her tears. "I had already stopped believing in goodness, but it turns out that there are still people who are ready to give a shoulder. Sandra, God sent you to me. Although not everything went smoothly at first, especially annoying bureaucratic obstacles, Sandra believed in success. One evening, Henry remarked, "Mother, I've been admiring our daughter these days. In a good way, of course." The young woman laughed. "Dad, that word always has a good meaning. But I had no idea that my person could delight." Rose supported her spouse. "And you do not laugh at your father. I completely agree with him. You really, after you threw your banker, became like a man, blossomed, prettier, in the eyes of a light burning." "Dad, you've praised me so much. Aren't you afraid that I'll become conceited?" "No, that's not typical of you. When you were a child, you fought for the truth, defended the weak, and it's nice to see the old Sandra now. So go ahead, my daughter, you might start your own business." This phrase, accidentally said by her father, is firmly planted in the brain of the innovator. Previously, she never thought that she could run her own business. It was because of insecurity. But the first 6 months on Aunt Lindsay's job had shown her that it could be a real challenge. Later on, the owner of the place herself began to speak openly about it. "Sandra, you can't be a backroom girl. I still can't believe that my beer hall has turned into a respectable establishment." The drunks, of course, are not happy about the change, but their opinion is the least of my concern. But the moms with their kids are coming in, and old grannies like to shop here. But what I like best is the name Aunt Lindsay's Pie Shop. It's succinct and beautiful. The owner did not exaggerate Sandra's merits. Indeed, without her help, it would have been impossible to do such a job in such a short period of time. Sandra was already treating the establishment as her own brainchild. The initiative woman became known in the region, and one day a newspaper correspondent came to them right in the middle of the working day. He clicked his camera and asked a lot of questions, and at the end of the conversation he asked, "Sandra, why don't you open your own business?" She thought for a long time and then honestly answered, "Over the past year my life has changed so abruptly that I do not have time to turn over the chips." I just hadn't given the question much thought. Just a few days later, Lindsay showed up at the pie shop in high spirits. "You guys won't believe this, but I'm getting married. If anyone thinks that at my age, it's a shame to organize a personal life and she's serious, it should be done without regard to the years. I've been so lucky for the first time in my life." The staff, and it was mostly women of different ages, ahahal and ahahal. And the cleaning lady even said in her heart, "People, if someone's got a shot at Lindsay, maybe I'll get one. I'm like that model on the runway." The woman walked through the hall, wiggling her hips and waving a mop. Everyone laughed heartily at the colorful number of the cleaner, but it was an ostentatious laugh. "What's going to happen to us now? Lindsay, if you leave us, I don't think the new owner will want to keep us." Girls, don't get discouraged. You are not going to get discouraged. I assure you that you won't end up on the streets because your new owner will be Sandra. So please love and welcome. It was so unexpected for everyone that the spacious room was so silent that the hum of the refrigerator seemed like the roar of an airplane. But it was Sandra who was most shocked. She tried to object to the hostess, but she invited her into her office with her signature gesture. "I wanted to surprise you so much, and I think I succeeded." Sandra, your jaw dropped down in amusement when I announced my decision in front of our team. The woman was used to the fact that her hostess's vocabulary consisted mostly of phrases not used in literature. What struck her most was the tone with which she was now uttering them. Lindsay's whole being was imbued with sadness. "You wouldn't believe, Sandra, how my heart is torn to pieces. I've grown attached to this town and my bar. I'm sorry, but I can't let this last chance slip away either. You want to be happy at any age, and I met a decent man. Maybe we'll make a model family with him. It's a pity that my darling lives in the far north, but my son has settled there. So if things don't work out with my new husband, I'll live out my life with my son. Of course, Aunt Lindsay, you'll do fine. But you could sell your business for a profit." "I could, but I can't trust my business to just anyone." "Yes, I can, and you're the one person I have 200% confidence in. I'll do my best to justify your trust, and I hope you'll come visit us." It took a few days to finalize the legal details. According to the terms of the deal, Sandra had to pay her former landlady an almost symbolic sum. "You've done a good deed for me, and I'd like to repay you in kind. After all, not everything in this world is measured in money. I really want things to get better for you." Lindsay sincerely wished the log success. and the words of this kindest woman were heard in heaven. Becoming a full-fledged owner of the pie shop, Sandra began to plan the expansion of the business, and soon she bought a small restaurant, which was located near the pie shop. The more successful Sandra's business went, the more friends she made. Mostly they were men who sought to win the favor of a single woman. Of course, some were annoyed by the success of the businesswoman. The list of bitter enemies of the woman turned out to be in the parents of her ex-husband. When Sandra disappeared with the children, Cameron believed that she would return. Nothing will crawl to my feet and will still be begging like alms that I took her back. My wife is not adapted to an independent life. She cannot do anything, and with her education, she punched only in what a diner to get a job. Such predictions Cameron gave in the company of friends on rare outings in nature. With the wife of the boss, he did not get involved from purely scurny motives, but Sandra's place was quickly taken by a young employee of his bank. The man kept in touch with her parents, so he was aware of the case of his runaway wife. When he learned that she had taken a job in a bar, his joy knew no bounds. I told you I wouldn't be surprised if she married a farmer or a chauffeur. Cameron's celebration was short-lived. Sandra filed for divorce and alimony. It was a turn he certainly hadn't expected. In a burst of emotion, he dialed his wife's number, but she abruptly cut off the flow of his swear words. "Cameron, now you and I are going to settle everything through the courts. Oh, I almost forgot. The apartment was not only bought with your money. In case you haven't forgotten, there's maternity capital, so your daughter has every right to a part of the capital's living space. I hope you won't dispute that fact." The banker was unpleasantly surprised by this news, but then from his parents began to come in quite stunning information. When he learned that Sandra, in addition to the pie shop, bought a restaurant, he had a fit of rage. Where did that miserable woman get the money from? She couldn't buy anything without my permission, and here's a whole restaurant. There's only one way to do that. The old way. But it works. I'm going to break the horns of that benefactor who's sponsoring my wife. While saying this monologue, Cameron forgot that Sandra is no longer legally his wife. The woman herself did not even guess what plans of revenge nurtured her former spouse. She tried not to think of him, and if the past inadvertently broke into dreams, she woke up in a cold sweat. The girls also rarely remembered their father. The eldest went to school and Lily went to kindergarten. That year, winter began suddenly. It had been drizzling rain since the evening, and in the morning it was freezing, and by lunchtime it began to snow. In a matter of hours, huge drifts grew in the streets. Sandra stayed late at the restaurant and hurried home, but for some reason she felt uneasy. Someone invisible whispered to her that she should check out the pie shop. To cheer herself up, the woman said out loud, "It's not far, only 200 meters. I'll go check it out just in case. God forbid there's a short circuit or something." Gusts of wind blew in her face, and Sandra had to walk the short distance for half an hour. But as soon as she reached her destination, a new surprise awaited her. She saw a human figure on a bench, almost completely covered in snow. It was a man, and he reeked of booze. "My God, he's going to freeze. You can't drink yourself into oblivion." She began to shake the man, who didn't look like the local drinkers. The man was wearing an expensive coat and a branded pair of shoes, and the unpleasant odor of unexpectedly, the latter answered and in a faltering tone, "Nothing. And who? For your information, I came by cab because I wanted to find the little person here." "Where'd you get so drunk, Scott? Do you even recognize me?" The man took a long look at her face and then sobered up. "Sandra, I've been looking for you, but I've been very well received here." Scott struggled to get up from the bench and looked around in surprise too. "It turns out that while I was asleep, winter started. Am I an ant or a dragonfly?" Sandra laughed. "We'll figure it out later. Be thankful I found you. You'd have frozen to death on that bench before morning." Rose was somehow not surprised to see Sandra in the company of a frozen Scott. "Oh, what's going on? I didn't mean for this to happen." "And here, Mom, please be a little more specific." "Daughter, don't swear at me, but Scott called me, and when he heard you divorced Cameron, he decided to come over. His life's not going well either. He'll tell you all about it later." Rose rushed to rescue the frozen guest, and Sandra couldn't help but marvel at her mother's resourcefulness. It wasn't until the next day that she was able to have a normal conversation with Scott. Not only was he freezing outside, but he was feeling very ill. One thing Sandra realized for sure, Scott had simply fallen in love with this hospitable town with equally hospitable residents. They were the ones who had gotten him so pumped up, albeit at his expense, but that didn't matter. After a hot soup and a mug of strong tea, the man was sweltering. Sandra spread him out on the couch and covered him with a blanket. Rose sighed. Such a good man and so unlucky in life. Mom, what's wrong with him? I can't believe that you've been talking to him for so long you don't know anything about him. The woman waved her hand. I do, but I don't know the details. Mom, Scott got married, started his own business, a lucrative one, some kind of restaurant or cafe. And when things got good, his wife left him and left him without a business. Don't think he doesn't drink. It's just something came over him, but he said he's not gonna give up. Starting from scratch means starting from scratch. Mom, you're so worried about him. Sandra, come on. You know Scott's a good man, and if he just... Mom, I'm not saying anything. How's work going? Sandra sat down tiredly. You know, I can't say it's bad, but... Mom. Her mother sat down in front of her. It's like there's something missing, like a twist, or I'm missing a detail that's right in front of my nose. Sandra, I feel like you're missing something. Sandra, I think you're being too picky. Sandra, in such a short time, your restaurant has become one of the best in the city. Sandra put her thumb up. That's right, Mom. One of the best, and I want the best. Rose smiled, recognizing my daughter, and you know what I'll tell you. If you want it, you're bound to get it. I know you. Thank you, Mommy. I'm going to bed. I want to get up early tomorrow. The cook has a grandson. She's taking the day off. Okay, go to bed. Good. From the doorstep, Sandra turned around. Mommy, how are the girls? I must be a bad mom. The girls are fine. Don't worry. And you're a good mother. It's just hard for you now, all alone, and my father and I don't understand anything about it to help. Sandra hugged her mother in a rush of feeling. What would I do without you? Early in the morning, she kissed the sleeping girls and ran off to the restaurant. There was a lot to do, and soon she forgot about everything. Cameron threw his shirt in his new girlfriend's face with annoyance. I don't understand. Is it so hard to throw the shirts in the machine and just iron them? The girl calmly threw the shirt on the floor and continued to put on her makeup. Finally, she pulled herself away from the mirror. Probably not. Cameron was furious. Of course not. Then I don't understand why you won't do it yourself. Then I don't understand why you won't do it. He choked with rage. Me? I have to wash my own shirts? Not me. In fact, I've been thinking. I'm not happy with all this. Cameron watched with huge eyes as the girl quickly threw her things into her bag and sent him a kiss. This just could be happening. How could it be? Someone out there and just take off on him like that? No, it was all Sandra's fault. She was the first one who dared to do something different from what he wanted. Cameron found a clean shirt in the depths of his closet with great difficulty and exhaled a sigh of relief. It had probably been ironed by Sandra, and then he was so furious. He should be suffering here, and this is a little businesswoman. It would be ridiculous if she, an illiterate fool, this business also brings money. Though her mother said Sandra had blossomed and the girls were well dressed, Cameron didn't want to believe that for some reason. He was absolutely sure that if he called Sandra, she would immediately come crawling back on her knees. Except that wasn't the plan either. She would have to crawl over and apologize, and he would forgive, of course. But not right away, and he'd have to make some rules for her. Cameron fancied himself thinking up rules, but then he shook himself. You might not even make it to work on time. As soon as he got to the bank, he was called in to see the chief. Cameron was surprised and even grimaced. He didn't really want to talk to the man who was the husband of his, albeit former mistress, but there was nothing to be done. For now, Cameron was still a servile man, though he had Napoleonic plans. May I? Come in, Cameron. Cameron went to the table and only now saw that at the table in the corner of the office sits Jewel and smiled at him. It gave Cameron a chill. She's just what he needed. It wasn't a pretty breakup, or rather, it wasn't pretty. Cameron's head was already spinning. He just found out that Sandra had filed for divorce, and then there was Jules. Well, it's a dream come true. I can move in with you. Cameron was dumbfounded. Cameron looked at her dumbfounded. You mean you're going to leave your husband? Of course I am, honey. We've talked about this so many times. He wrinkled his nose like a toothache. It's true what they say, beauty and brains are incompatible. And you're going to work? Jewel fluttered her eyelashes in surprise. Why? Well, I doubt that your money bag will give you a generous parting gift, but for me to stay where I am is out of the question. Jewel stared at him for a while, then said, So you don't want me in your life? Jules, think about it. But Lisa was already carried away. She screamed so that Cameron grabbed his head and just pushed her out of the apartment. To be honest, at first he was very worried. She'd complained to her husband and then what? But it didn't seem to bother him. Now, watching her in the chair, he realized it's nothing like that. People like her don't forgive. Cameron, I have an offer you can't refuse. Cameron tensed up. I'm listening. We need to help our office. It's not that far away, only 300 kilometers from Chicago. Cameron snowed. That's it. They're gonna send him to some shithole and forget him. Don't worry, it's only for a few months, and then you can go back to your job. Cameron realized he had no choice, so he waved his head doomfully. But the surprises didn't end there. He stayed there for almost 6 months, coming to the apartment on weekends, sleeping it off, scrubbing up because hot water outages were the norm where he was forced to be. He knew that some young employee was temporarily performing his duties and was sure that he would fail him in all this work. But he was wrong. The young employee not only did not screw up his work, but made some adjustments that were to the liking of his boss. Anyway, when Cameron came back, he was given a handshake. I'm sorry, Cameron, but your successor is doing a much better job than you are. Sorry, Cameron. What am I supposed to do? You promised me I'd get my job back. You don't think I'd put you back in your position at the expense of the bank? You can't. You can go back to your old position or look for another one if you don't like it. Cameron wrote his letter of resignation in full confidence that he would be fired, but of course that didn't happen. He blamed Sandra for everything, absolutely everything. He had a thought in his head that he should go and see how she was doing, especially since he had children there. Cameron liked that thought. He even called his mother. Oh, Cameron, I don't know if you should come. Sandra's doing very well. I don't think you'd like it. What do you mean she's doing very well? Tell me her diner is making a good profit. Cameron laughed, but his mother didn't cheer him up. She's got more than one restaurant now. I know she's got one in the next town over. Cameron choked on his saliva. Mom, does she have a rich patron there? Somebody's got to tell a fool what to do. Mom didn't even get a chance to say a word before Cameron threw him out. It doesn't matter, though. It's time to visit his daughters and his wife. To look her in the eye. She's been on my payroll for years, and now look at her. He didn't say anything else. He just hung up the phone. Sandra. Cameron suddenly turned around. What does he have in his life? Nothing. Not even a position stripped from him. Not even any of the ladies around him. Of course, as he was on the horse, so interesting to everyone, and as a little fell down, so all passed by and pretend not to know. Sandra was so busy that day that she forgot all about Scott, but he didn't forget about her. He came to her restaurant at lunchtime. Can I sit here in the corner? Sandra smiled. Sit, of course, if it's not boring. I don't have a chef's banquet today, so I have to get around. Scott resolutely took off his jacket. Do you have anything to change into? Sandra looked at him in amazement. God, I'd forgotten you were the best chef ever. Scott frowned modestly. Well, I guess you're exaggerating, but I can do some things. In the evening, tired and both happy, they accepted praise from the visiting guests. One of them approached them when everyone was leaving. I live in another city, but I really liked it here. What if I invite your team to my mansion? Everything to prepare for an anniversary for about 100 people. As you can imagine, money is not a problem at all. Scott and Sandra looked at each other, and the woman immediately thought that it would be immediately you can buy a new oven, many other things. After a couple weeks, Sandra decided that it was necessary to ask Scott, after all, what their plans for the future were. Sandra, I don't know what to say. Let's talk like adults. Sandra blushed for some reason. Rose immediately rushed off to do something important. Okay, let's. She realized that talking at work wouldn't stop everything, but she was ready. Every day, Sandra realized more and more what mistakes she had made. Scott had once been the complete opposite of Cameron. Lily and Lizzie were literally never far from him when he was at home. If they never even tried to approach their father with their problems, then Scott was approached without any shyness. Sandra, you know there's a reason I called your mom. I didn't just come here when I found out you left your husband. I realized that. I wish I'd told you right away so I wouldn't be dragged down by reticence. When I saw you, I realized that nothing's ever really gone at all. I still want to look at you and admire you. You know, maybe it's for the best that there's nothing holding me there anymore. I'd like to start all over again from when you and I first met. Sandra stood up, walked over to the window. I don't know what to say to you right now. Scott jumped up. There's no need to say anything right now. Let things be the way they are. I'm not asking for an answer. It'll come to me. And about everything else, I'd love to work at your restaurant. Sandra approached him a couple months later. Scott, he understood. He put his arm around her. I'll make you and the girls happy, I promise. Cameron continued to look for work. The money was disappearing at a disastrous rate. Now he didn't understand how Sandra managed to run the house on the money he was giving her. No, he wasn't a cheapskate. At the time, it had seemed to him that he was giving away very substantial sums of money, but now he realized that in order to live normally, one had to dodge somehow, and he had long since gotten used to such things. At last his luck turned to him, but not with his face. He was offered a job as a small clerk in a bank. Do you even know what position I was working in? Of course. Of course, that's why we made it easy for you. If you don't like it, you can keep looking. You have to understand, a bank is not the same as a bank. And it is one thing when a young, inexperienced employee comes and we will invest in him what we need, or a person who is used to work in a different way comes to us. It's very difficult to retrain. He had no choice but to accept. At least he had time to pay the rent. Then he remembered that the apartment was part of the court-granted share to Sandra and the girls, and that Sandra could claim her share at any time. Of course, he didn't believe that. But his mom had told him some strange things about his ex-wife. Towards summer, he finally got ready to go back to his hometown. He didn't know why he was going, whether to visit his mother or to see Sandra. The fact that he had children there, Cameron remembered only in conversation with colleagues. All the way there, he made plans, how he'd take her down morally. Obviously, for a town this size, any diner is good. Of course, he would gladly rub her face in all the flaws. As luck would have it, his way ran through the square, where the restaurant was renovated. Money was tight, though Cameron wasn't going to pay. Would Sandra have the conscience to take money from someone who fed and clothed her for so many years? He parked, looked around. It was a good location, not far from the movie theater, the park. The traffic was good. I wondered if Sandra really did it. Cameron's teeth chattered and he clenched his fists. But you'll regret it? You'll regret it, won't you? He pushed the door open with determination. Sandra, the vegetables are here. They're bad. Mark doesn't want to sign that they're bad. And Sandra raised her hand. Okay, Lee, be quiet. Lena was the new manager at the restaurant. A young girl, smart, with a personality. There was only one flaw. As soon as she got nervous, she'd rant so loud that no one could stop her but Sandra. Calm down. I'll go and talk to Mark. Oh, Sandra. Oh, Sandra. If only Scott were here, he'd give him a hard time. But you know Scott's out getting new furniture for the banquet room. I know, I can't wait till he gets here. Sandra was hurt on one hand that so much hope was pinned on Scott, as if she didn't mean anything anymore. But on the other hand, it was a very good thing. She would have to leave the restaurant for a while, and this way, she would be completely at ease. Scott would be able to handle it at all. The woman rose heavily from the table. She was still 2 months away from giving birth, and she could barely walk. She felt better when she was carrying the girls. Maybe she was younger. Maybe it was the girls. Mark saw her, and it snowballed. But what man could argue with a pregnant woman like that? He sighed sadly, signed some paper. Mark, you promised me that my restaurant would only serve the freshest food. Where am I going to get the freshest? Where am I going to get the freshest? And where am I going to put the old stuff? But we're paying you well, above market price. What? Just for you to bring us fresh ones? Yes, I remember, but I have to try and sell my products. I'll send my son in an hour. He'll bring another. Sandra smiled. But what can you do with him? All the time he needs an eye and an eye. She returned to the office, just wanted to sit down, but immediately in the office again appeared Leah. Sandra. What now? There's a visitor demanding to see you, at the table behind the curtain. What's going on in there? Lee shrugged. I don't know. He seemed happy. At least it's all eaten. God, what a day today. Sandra went into the hall. She'd had a headache all morning. The girls at home had the flu. It looked like she wanted to be sick, and she couldn't be sick. She has a son who won't like it. Sandra stroked her stomach, smiled, remembered how Scott had reacted to the news that they were having a baby. For a while he stood there just looking at her. Then he knelt down and pressed his face against her belly. I thought I'd never hear words like that again, even somehow made peace with it. Thank you. She walked down the hall, climbed the 3 steps, and froze. Cameron was sitting in front of her, smirking. Something was beginning to stir in her soul that made her bend her shoulders and pull her head in. But Sandra quickly came to her senses. That's all I need. She doesn't depend on him, and Cameron is nothing to her. Cameron, what are you doing here? I just came to see what uneducated gray women are up to these days. He saw her belly. He saw her belly. He grinned wider. What didn't you calculate while you were courting your virtues? Sandra felt nausea coming up her throat. This has nothing to do with you. Why did you call me? You've changed. You've gotten meaner. You've learned to growl back. Cameron, I don't have much time. He's up. That's how it is. You used to have all the time in the world for me. Then tell me, what did you like about it? The truth? You ran away from the truth? But what you really are is you're a dumb, ugly little bitch, and you're nothing in bed. I don't know what you're offended by. The nausea stopped unbearable, but Sandra smiled in response to the words of her ex-husband. It seemed to be, or in your words, squeaks envy. Have you seen yourself, Cameron? The shirt is not fresh. The pants have blisters on the knees. Maybe some people wouldn't notice, but not me. What about your perfection? You're always perfect. But you're surrounded by dorks, or maybe you're not so cool anymore. She wanted to leave, but Cameron grabbed her arm hard and painfully. Where? I haven't told you to go yet. Let go, it hurts. Sandra jerked her hand away sharply, and Cameron brought his face closer to her. It seems to me that you owe me a lot of things. Cameron, let me go, do you hear me? You're nothing to me. You have no right. He squinted angrily and abruptly let go of Sandra. She couldn't hold on to the top step and flew screaming downwards. The height wasn't much, but here was her position. Sandra fell right at the feet of her husband, who came and went looking for her. Sandra. The man knelt down on his knees. An ambulance quickly. The staff ran towards him as well, and Scott raised a heavy look at Cameron. It's you. Cameron backed away. He knew the man from somewhere, he just didn't understand where yet. Cameron realized he had to run. He'd better hide now. He didn't have time. Scott's fist met him on the last step. You're gonna answer for this. You're gonna answer for everything. He ran out of the restaurant, but no one chased him. Sandra fell into the darkness, then floated out of it. Her stomach ached so intolerably that she wanted to scream. Patience, my dear, a little patience. Rose took the girls. Henry said he would meet his ex-brother-in-law properly. He said he had the strength to get him down the stairs. Sandra smiled weakly. Daddy can. The pain pierced her whole body again. Be patient, dear, we're here now. Someone was talking over her. Then she was being wheeled somewhere. She felt a prick in her arm and immediately felt very light. Sandra closed her eyes. Scott was out of breath. He paced back and forth in the hallway until an orderly yelled at him. But why are you walking like a pendulum? Does that make you feel better? It doesn't, and you won't let me mop the floors. He looked at the old woman in confusion. I'm sorry, and sat down. She came up to him. Wife? Yes. Don't worry. We have very good doctors. Thank you. The phone rang in my pocket. Yes, it was Rose. Scott, how's Sandra? The woman was crying. I don't know anything yet. She's in surgery. Scott, that bastard Cameron, he set fire to the pie shop. How? Well, they caught him, but they couldn't save the pie shop. No one was hurt. No, it was nothing. Scott, you call me as soon as you know anything. Okay. He just disconnected the call when the doctor appeared at the door. Scott stood up and stared at him in silence. But why are you staring at me like that? You should be watching your wife. 15 minutes later, and you wouldn't have saved her. You've got a kid. Premature, of course, but he's strong. He'll gain weight quickly, so don't worry. Scott exhaled noisily, and Sandra will be fine, but you won't be able to have children. We have 3. Well, that's good. Scott suddenly stepped toward the doctor. Thank you. Thank you. He hugged him, then grabbed Rose's cell phone. Baby, it's okay. Sandra's fine too. And we're gonna build a new pie shop that's way cooler than the first one. Sandra opened her eyes and immediately remembered what had happened. She put her hand to her stomach and froze in horror. Immediately, her husband's smiling face appeared above her. Don't worry, everything is fine. Our son is alive and will soon be perfectly healthy. Scott, Sandra, he took her hand in his. When I realized that I could have lost you, I immediately thought that I don't need anything here without you. What's my point? I love you so much that I didn't even know it. Sandra smiled. I love you too. They were not discharged until a month later. Sandra was a little nervous. Scott had only been around for a few minutes lately and then ran off somewhere else. She couldn't figure out what was wrong. Then this morning she saw on the news that her pie shop had burned down a month ago. She was furious. Why hadn't he said anything? But she'd give him a hard time at home. They were driving down some strange road. Why are we driving here? I want to show you something. It's not the remains of a pie shop. Scott turned to her. How long have you known? This morning. I just didn't want to worry you. The car stopped. They were standing in the square, her restaurant visible just a little in the distance, and next to them a small building with a nice sign that read Pastry Shop by Lizzie's. As you realize on the other side of town, Pastry Shop at Lizzie's, Sandra felt tears forming in her eyes. Scott hugged her. Am I forgiven? Sandra snuggled into his chest. Why was I such a fool not to marry you in the first place? Why? We all make mistakes in life, but if we don't hurry up, it'll be our last. Rose is going to kill us because she was almost up all night cooking and the girls were helping her. Sandra laughed, looking at her son who was sleeping sweetly. Yes, we have to go because our grandmother is strict. A week after their return, there was an opening of the pastry shops. Sandra was nervous, but Scott was completely calm. He now knew that nothing would ever destroy the happiness of their large and strong family, and on top of that he brought 2 pastry chefs from the capital. He had forgotten to tell the line about it, and now he was afraid. Just a few days ago there was a trial. Cameron confusedly said that it was his ex-wife who brought him to such a state. He explained that she had taken away his good fortune and in fact she should be tried, and Sandra suddenly stood up. I want to drop the lawsuit. I want him to live free. Scott only then did Scott realize how much Sandra had punished Cameron. At first he didn't understand such an impulse, and when Cameron stopped beside them and said, So you uncouth redneck, made it so I owe you now? I hate you. Scott stood up and Cameron quickly headed for the door. Scott looked at Sandra. She finally smiled. Well, let him suffer a little. He won't be around much longer anyway. Scott laughed. You are a dangerous woman. Sandra smiled back. I'm just the most loving and loving.